If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 21, A Powder Keg Taking Shape. Kakashi had a bad feeling about this. He was currently standing in front of his new Hokage, who was staring out her window towards the bustling village below them. Behind him stood Shizuan, Tsunade's assistant and student. Kakashi. The Godame finally spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. If you are late one more time for a mission assignment. Yes, Hokage-sama. He replied innocently, clearly not taking the threat seriously. The blonde woman sighed loudly before continuing. We have gotten permission from Wave to send a diplomatic team to their island. I will be on time from now on. If that was all, then You're going. She interrupted him bluntly. Kakashi stiffened slightly at that statement, before bowing slightly. As you command, Hokage-sama. Tsunade rolled her eyes before pointing down at some scrolls on her desk. Left is for what we can offer and what we want, right is the short list of people available for your team. That place is cursed, the amount of headache it caused him the last time, why couldn't she pick anyone else? It wasn't fair. He knew that technically he was the one with experience on those islands, so he should be the most qualified, but he still hated this job already. Remember, this is a diplomatic mission, Tsunade said with emphasis. So keep it peaceful, no matter how much you might want to fight someone. Kakashi felt very offended right now, he was the very definition of peacefulness. I would never, Hokage-sama. He replied in slight offense. Tsunade responded by raising an eyebrow. So you wouldn't strangle the one called Ayamo if you saw him? Kakashi's hand twitched, his fingers grasping an imaginary neck. Damn. She totally saw that. When do I depart, Hokage-sama? He said, defeated. As Haiden watched the fisherman crawl away, leaving a trail of blood behind him, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. Why are people always so scared of being killed? Once they die, they are freed from all the pains and stresses of life, and become a part of Jashin-sama's paradise forevermore. It is a truly blessed existence. It's quite rude how they see this gift as anything less than pure bliss. Oi, stop daydreaming and get to work. A voice said, snapping Haiden out of his thoughts. He turned around angrily, only to see Kakuzu glaring down at him impatiently. Oh, shut up, moneybags, Haiden retorted irritably. What are we even doing here anyway? We should just go to that fucking bridge and slaughter everyone there. Kakuzu gave him yet another annoyed look, clearly unimpressed by Haiden's attitude. Leader explained this to us already. He had? Oh, was it when he was busy fantasizing about killing? We should only take the Jinchuriki if they are isolated and alone. The bridge will draw attention, and leader wants us to stay hidden, so we steal a boat. Haiden groaned loudly in frustration. Why did everything have to be so complicated? He started drawing a circle on the ground. Kakuzu sighed in exasperation before turning away from him. Just hurry up already, we need to leave before someone finds us. Haiden scoffed at that notion of rushing a sacrifice to Jashin-sama. One day, he would show Kakuzu the truth of Lord Jashin's words, and then the miserly fucker will learn what a true blessing death is. Saiken morphed his hand into something more resembling a human shape, with 5 digits, including an opposable thumb. It was a lot harder than before, requiring far more concentration and precision. The slug sighed softly as he flexed his new fingers experimentally, finding them slightly awkward to move around due to their unfamiliarity. He felt vulnerable like this. Before, his body was malleable and easily changeable at will, now it required focus and effort to change its shape. But there were also benefits. His new biology allowed him to store and release chakra in a way similar to a human, giving him access to techniques previously unavailable to him. That was the whole reason he had morphed his fingers, after all, so he could practice hand signs. His new hand finished shifting into a tiger seal, a rush of power surged through his body as his chakra flowed through it freely. It felt different from what he was used to, but it worked. Saiken was covered in smoke for a moment before it cleared out, revealing his transformation. It was a human boy, short in stature with off-white hair, wearing simple brown clothes, and possessing no features of note beyond a small scar on one cheek. Saiken didn't feel too comfortable in this form, but he would get used to it eventually. He needed to blend in with humans if he wanted to avoid being hunted down. He started making his way towards Wave's capital, avoiding any travelers or people along the way. He was still nervous about interacting with humans. But the being that claimed to be a god did free him, and it did not hurt Utakata, so perhaps he could at least show some faith in it. So, Kaguya was not an irredeemably evil villain, she was just kinda crazy. That was, both good and bad news, good because she could be reasoned with, bad because of why she did all she did in the first place. Her species were parasites that drained chakra from planets. She betrayed them for some reason, Saiken didn't know why, only that she abandoned her old ways and instead protected Earth. Unfortunately, she was still insane, she thought draining humanity of its chakra was her right. She saw humans as parasites that stole chakra from her. Ironic. It also revealed another problem, Kaguya was already free, well, free in the sense that she wasn't sealed away. The body of the Johobi was Kaguya's true body, she had merged with the God Tree and become one with it. This meant that she was literally on Earth right now, the only thing missing was the tailed beast chakra. Well, it didn't change much in my planning, really. Keep growing stronger and expand my religion anywhere I could. I already had a place in mind. His name was Yamazaki, and he was a member of the military wing. He was currently kneeling in front of the High Priestess, who was standing in front of his squad. You all have shown great dedication to the Watcher, Haruka spoke softly. And your devotion has been recognized, you will be rewarded appropriately. Today, you shall receive a blessing from the Watcher. Haruka continued as a black portal opened behind her. Yamazaki swallowed nervously as a massive form stepped out of the rift. He had seen the Star Eaters before, but this one was bigger than any other he had ever seen. It was nearly 5 meters tall. The Star Eater approached slowly until it towered over them, its eyes glowed with golden light as it stared down at each of them individually. My Creator has tasked me with delivering a gift unto you. It said, in a rumbling tone. A reward for your service to him. Suddenly, Yamazaki felt something within his chest stir, something warm and powerful. A fire spread through his veins, as if liquid lava flowed inside them instead of blood. It didn't hurt though, quite the opposite, actually. He felt stronger, faster, more alive than ever before. These blessings are a sign of your status amongst the Watcher's followers, Haruka spoke once more. From now on, you are not initiates, but acolytes. He could almost feel the excitement in the room rising, as everyone exchanged glances with each other. Of course, power comes with responsibility. And as such, you will have 2 days to get used to your blessings. Haruka continued. Afterward, you shall be dispatched on a mission. With that, the Star Eater stepped forward once again. In 2 days' time, you will escort me, Amikiri, to the land of demons, where we will establish a presence there, the divine beast said. It will be our first foothold outside Wave, so failure is not an option. Yamazaki bowed deeper, determination filling him. Failure was not an option, indeed. Praise the Watcher. Chapter 22, A Sacrifice Worthy of Jashin. Haydn was so bored. When the fuck are they going to capture that Jinkra key? They arrived in Wave almost 2 days ago, and now he was just sitting around on this shitty beach waiting for Kakuzu to find the Jinkra key. He grumbled irritably while sharpening his scythe. If they didn't do something soon, he was going to take a little trip to the nearest village and kill everyone there. He was interrupted from his fantasies of slaughter when Kakuzu walked up behind him. I found him. Finally. He got up quickly and turned towards Kakuzu. Well? Where is the little shit? Close by. The miser answered, already walking back into the forest. Haydn followed eagerly behind him, his anger replaced with excitement. They would eventually arrive at a small cliff overlooking the ocean, where there was a cave in the wall. Within, they could see a few beds, a fire pit and a small group of people hanging out together. Watchers, they pretend to be fishermen, but they are clearly sentries. Kakuzu said after pointing towards one man who was on watch. Haydn wasn't listening, he should sacrifice the people in the cave. Those people in the cave. His mind felt foggy for some reason. But why? What is this feeling? It's like his entire being drawn to those men. Maybe he should go closer. He shook it off, and reached into his robes and grabbed his Jashin pendant, it burned in his hand, as if angry at him for not killing. Ah! Of course. Lord Jashin always rewarded his faithful. The hunger he felt was probably a boon from Jashin-sama himself. He wasn't under some genjutsu or compulsion, Lord Jashin was simply showing him a bounty of sacrifices to slaughter. Lord Jashin! He muttered quietly. You truly are a merciful god. Kakuzu looked at him with concern, but Haydn didn't pay attention to him, instead staring hungrily at the men below them. He slowly started walking towards the cliff edge. Haiden? What are you doing? Kakuzu asked suspiciously. I have a hunger that needs to be sated, miser. He replied cheerfully. What the fuck are you? Before Kakuzu could finish, Haiden leaped forward from their hiding place, his scythe already drawn. Jashin-sama! Haiden screamed out as he descended upon them from above. He brought his scythe down hard on one of the sentries, splitting him clean in half and spraying blood everywhere. The other watchers were startled by the sudden appearance of the immortal maniac, but swiftly moved into position regardless. One started weaving hand signs rapidly as the other drew a sword and charged at Haiden with murderous intent. The sword wielder trusted his Otaki forward, aiming to stab the heart. A good tactic against any normal human opponent. Unfortunately for him, Haiden wasn't exactly a normal human anymore. Haiden laughed gleefully, ignoring the blade piercing his chest completely. He swung his scythe upwards, slicing off his attacker's arm before kicking him away violently. The ninja with the hand signs finished his jutsu as Haiden turned towards him, a stream of water striking him dead on. The zombie was unimpressed, tanking the water bullet even as it broke his bones. He staggered slightly but didn't fall over or show any sign of pain. Is that all? He asked mockingly before suddenly speeding up and grabbing hold of the water user's head in one fluid motion. Jashin-sama be praised! Haiden shouted triumphantly, smashing the poor soul's skull against a nearby rock. With both of his opponents incapacitated, Haiden turned back to where he had left the man who tried to stab him earlier. He found him trying to crawl away, leaving a trail of blood from his stump behind. You! Do you not understand the blessing I bring? Haiden yelled out angrily. You should feel honored to give your life to Jashin-sama. The maimed watcher frantically tried to get away, only to be grabbed by the leg and dragged back. Haiden cut his own wrist on the scythe blade, drawing a circle of blood around the injured man. He was going to savor this sacrifice. Now then! I shall honor your sacrifice with the greatest gift of all. He grinned, eyes wide and crazed. Eternal life. I was planning my expansion to the more remote regions of the elemental nations when I felt it, a sharp tug on the metaphysical tether that connected me to my followers. Someone had died, they were an initiate in the military wing, from the second batch of recruits. But why did I not receive their soul? My attention snapped towards where they died, a chunk of DP disappearing as I remotely viewed the scene. A cave near the ocean, with two initiates inside it. Both of them within a circle of blood, one unconscious from a massive head wound, and another missing an arm, who was also in the process of bleeding out. Standing above him was a man covered in black skin and white lines, with a massive scythe. No. Instantly, I tried using a good amount of DP to teleport the two wounded men into Kazuo's care. Nothing happened, all the DP used for that vanished uselessly. Being absorbed into the circles painted in blood. Well, isn't this just great? Someone is trying to steal my followers from me. Not cool, dude, not cool. I cursed silently, another chunk of DP disappearing as 5 rifts appeared on the cave ceiling. 5 Star Eaters fell out of them, landing around the man in a circle. Yatagarasu was leading them. The immortal zombie looked at them curiously, he didn't seem worried at all, probably because he literally can't die. What the fuck are you supposed to be? He asked gruffly, readying his scythe. Angry pigeons. Don't physically hurt him, any damage done will be reflected to the initiates. I ordered mentally, this fucker was going to regret ever touching my followers. Haiden was looking at the 5 massive fucking crows warily, he had never seen anything like them before. They were easily twice as tall as a person, covered in black feathers, with 3 glowing golden eyes. What the actual fuck is going on? Normally, he would have taunted them and provoked them into attacking first. But Lord Jashin was still urging him forward. Before the creatures could respond, he stabbed himself in the heart with his scythe. A part of him burned at skipping the prayer and ritual of the sacrifice, but he could almost hear his god screaming at him to just kill already. As his scythe blade sunk deep into his chest, the surrounding cave disappeared into darkness, replaced by a vast ocean of blood. A sea of corpses floating along with it. It was beautiful, all those sacrifices for Jashin-sama. Hello Haiden. A voice echoed around him. It was made of thousands of screams and whispers combined into one. He looked up and saw, a giant, human in shape, but clearly not in nature. It as big as a castle, its skin made of a million tiny pieces, all of them different shades and ages, from young to old, man to woman, smooth to wrinkled, every race he had ever seen. All the sacrifices he had ever made were there too, he could recognize their skin tone or size amongst the mosaic of flesh that was this being. In its head there were 2 holes where eyes should be, and it lacked a mouth, yet he heard it clearly regardless. This had to be Lord Jashin. Who else would have such power? Lord Jashin! What is your will? He cried out happily. Bring me more. Lord Jashin waved his hand, and 3 bodies rose from the blood ocean, the ones he killed earlier in the cave. I struggled and toiled for eons to claim a sliver of divinity, yet this fool wastes it on meaningless blessings. The bodies twitched, and from their heads emerged golden lights, rising up toward Jashin. Each one flew into him and was absorbed into his body. I want more. Lord Jashin spoke again. Bring me more. Haydn suddenly felt overwhelmed by an intense desire to serve, a strong compulsion came over him, demanding obedience without question. Yes, my God! He shouted joyfully. Chapter 23, Jashin in the Flesh. I watched as Haydn stabbed himself with his scythe and fell, unmoving. Wait, did he actually die? Maybe he was just pretending? Nope, none of the Star Eaters sensed any life from him. But my worshippers' souls were still missing. Usually if they dedicated their life to me and died they would arrive at my realm instantly, and then I would send them off to the Pure Lands. That meant someone took them or destroyed them, probably Jashin. Guess I am not lucky enough to be the only god around. Destroy the circle and burn his body, leave no traces, I ordered mentally, making all 5 crows chirp in acknowledgement. Haydn's body suddenly jerked up, as if coming back to life, startling everyone present. The immortal man looked around confused before speaking. The fuck? A massive claw grabbed him by the leg before dragging him away violently from the circle. The circle of blood was instantly broken, with 2 Star Eaters smashing through it and destroying its integrity. The one holding Haydn had thrown him into a nearby wall. Then the other 2 proceeded to divide themselves, charging up 4 attacks between them. All of them opened their maws wide open and unleashed their abilities at once. 4 beams of energy exploded from their mouths, crashing into Haydn and engulfing him completely. There was nothing but heat and light, as everything in the cave was bathed in bright glow. When it finally subsided, there was only a charred skeleton left behind. But I knew the truth, Haydn didn't die, I could feel the divinity swirling around him. I never really paid attention to what my divinity felt like, I got it from my faithful and used it without much thought after all. It just felt like an extension of me. This was divinity felt disgusting, rotten, even if it was extremely similar to mine. It stank of blood and murder, even though I didn't have a nose or sense of smell. I'm going to rip this wannabe god into pieces, the fucker was still holding on to my worshippers' souls. Standard formation, never let both bodies be in close proximity with him. His creator warned them. He and the other Star Eaters obeyed instantly, 5 bodies moved to the front, and 5 stayed back. The body of Haydn suddenly twitched, his skin and muscles regenerating rapidly before their very eyes. Even his clothes and his weapon were repaired. As soon as he was fully restored, Yatagarasa's second body charged forward at full speed, slashing out with its talons. The other 4 followed suit. Haydn blocked each strike expertly despite not having time to get ready, deflecting their claws with his scythe and moving around them quickly to avoid being surrounded. He was faster than before, and stronger too. Every one of Yatagarasa's movements seemed sluggish in comparison, every time they tried to hit him, he would dodge or block effortlessly. You're just like them, aren't you, birds? Haydn asked as he struck out with a kick that sent one of Yatagarasa's siblings flying across the cave. Full of misused blessings. The body flew towards a wall before disappearing into thin air, another appearing next to the others instantly. All 6 of them charged up their beams once more, while the 4 bodies that were closer slowed Haydn down as much as possible. Just as they all finished charging, Haydn finally managed to impale one of the Star Eaters through the head with his scythe blade. But it was too late, the 5 of them fired at once, and everything went white again. I stared at the smoke rising from what was now a second molten crater. I could feel Jashin's divinity moving around Haydn, his body already reforming for the second time. This wasn't working, I could keep letting my Star Eaters wail on him until Jashin gave up, but this wasn't a video game, Jashin could learn and adapt. So I wasn't going to let him set the pace. Retreat, I'll take care of this. Half the Star Eater left, while the extra bodies disappeared. It was clear that a fight of mortals wasn't going to solve this, and honestly, I wanted to beat Jashin up anyways. I gathered my DP, and for the first time I materialized my true body into the physical world. Not an illusion, not an empty flesh suit I could control, an actual godly body. High above the cliff where the cave was located, the sky turned into darkness. A sea of stars appeared in the night sky, and from behind, I came forth. Then I fell to earth like a meteor. The land trembled beneath me as I landed on the ground with a deafening crash, the cave crumbling beneath me, crushing what remained of Haiden's recovering body. I used some DP to find where Haiden was buried before digging him out with one of my massive limbs. His body was already mostly restored. Though it wouldn't matter, I wasn't here for him. As he stared at me in shock, I materialized a stake made of starlight, impaling him through the heart. This stake had its own powerful blessings infused into it, nullifying regenerative abilities like Haiden's. This dickhead had already cost me a week's worth of DP, not that big of a deal with my current reserves, but still annoying. My plan was simple, Jashin wanted my divine power, right? I'll give him all he can stomach. I felt a metaphysical hand trying to grasp onto the divine power within my stake. The moment it started doing that, I willed for more divinity to pour out from me and into the connection. Faster than Jashin could absorb. And once I did that, now I had a direct connection to Jashin's realm. I gleefully reached back through it, grabbing the fucker by the metaphysical neck. His response was immediate panic as he tried to let go of his hold on my divinity, but it was too late, he already lost his chance. Now that I had my fingers around his metaphorical throat, I began to drag him into the physical world with my divine power. The difference between our powers wasn't massive, but I clearly had the advantage. Haiden screamed as a god was pulled through his soul and body, blood pouring from everywhere as his form twisted unnaturally. Until finally, in front of me stood Jashin. Jashin was, surprisingly humanoid-looking, if you ignored the hole entirely made of thousands of tiny pieces of skin thing. The god of murder, death, and blood was roughly as tall as I was, staring at me with two empty sockets. I, of course, decked him in the face. Chapter 24, Jashin gets checked. Jashin flew across the destroyed cliffside from the force of the blow, crashing into a distant hill and turning it into rubble. I immediately charged after him, taking to the air in an instant. Thief. It was the first word I spoke to him. He responded by throwing some sort of blood orb at me that exploded. It burned. It was the first time that I felt pain in my godly body. It didn't damage me, it burned away my divinity with his own, a battle of attrition then. DP 22634 22119. Whelp, you think you can beat me? Me? He screamed out as we collided, exchanging blows that could shatter skyscrapers in a rain of light and blood. I am the first murderer. The Lord of Slaughter. You think a newborn like you is worthy of? I headbutted him, cutting off whatever stupid speech he was about to give. He was strong, I will admit that, but he should have been stronger. If he was as old as he proclaimed to be, he should be handling me like a grown adult handles a particularly spirited puppy. That's what happened when you encouraged your faithful to murder anything that moved. But I didn't want to make this a slugfest, too wasteful, and I wasn't certain I had enough power to win, so I am going to lay a trap. I materialized a meteorite as far in the sky as I could, infused with as much divinity as I could, hiding it from sight within the starry sky. Jashin didn't let me stand still, though, and manifested an appropriately sized scythe of blood and attacked. DP 22134 19414. I allowed him to stab me through the heart with it, which hurt like a bitch, but it also allowed me to hold on to him. I looked up, causing Jashin to follow my line of sight, tightening my grip as he tried to dodge away. He struggled against my grip desperately, but it was too late. Just before the meteorite hit, I quickly returned to my divine realm, deliberately leaving a way for him to follow. He tried to go back to his realm, but that was still full of my divinity, so I used it to block him off. He could have cleared my divinity out of his realm in a few seconds, it was his realm after all, but he didn't have the time. He had no choice, either he got hit by the meteorite or he followed me. We both materialized in my realm of stars. Jashin looked around in panic before screaming in anger at me, guess he knew that he was fucked now. DP 19134 18262. Foolish, short-sighted. Perish knowing you are unmourned and unloved. I declared, manifesting chains around him. Jashin thrashed against the bindings wildly, tearing some apart. But I just kept making more and more until he couldn't move anymore. DP 18262 12943. Then I manifested a star around him, strong enough to erase him. He burned away slowly, each layer of skin melting into the next. He desperately tried to escape, but I didn't let him. Any attempt to return to the mortal world was blocked, any attempt to go back to his realm was denied, any broken chain was replaced by 2 more. DP 12943412. Until eventually, after minutes of screaming, there was nothing left. Jashin was dead. Suck it fucker, who's a newborn now. His divinity melted away into nothingness, my own increasing just slightly from his stolen blessings. Now, then, to clean up countless years of sacrificed souls. I used my divinity still left inside his realm to let all the trapped souls pass on. Countless lost souls washed through me, more than I thought possible. Even if Jashin wasn't that active, there was always at least one insane follower, but this went beyond that. I let thousands upon thousands of souls pass through the Pure Lands, guiding them to their rest. Some of the first that I saw were familiar to me, the 3 initiates that were killed by Haydn, their souls only a little bit weaker than they should be. I fixed them as much as possible before sending them to join the others in the Pure Lands. They deserved a peaceful rest for being my worshippers. Honestly, how hard is it to not be an awful god? Kakuzu tiredly rode towards the land of fire. After Haydn rushed into the cave screaming about Jashin's will or something, he had quickly made himself scarce. There was no way he was getting involved in whatever mess his partner started. So he decided to go after the Jinchuriki by himself. Since Haydn was bound to cause a ruckus, might as well use that as a distraction to capture the Jinchuriki. The fight was a mess, Kakuzu was arrogant, and though he thought he could just handle the situation, the damn slug managed to destroy 2 of his hearts. He got a lucky break when the giant star person dropped from the sky, that distracted the Jinchuriki for long enough that he was able to use a combination of lightning and water release to trap him inside an electrified whirlpool. That evened the fight, but it quickly turned into a stalemate. He expected Jinchuriki to be strong and fast, not this. It was like fighting a machi monster from hell, it kept stretching and shooting acid at him. Just as he was about to run away, a giant meteor crashed down from the sky, destroying his water and lightning hearts in the process. When he emerged from his hole in the ground on the edge of the crater, he found the Jinchuriki unconscious, apparently having been hit by the meteor as well. Well, that was fortunate for him. So here he was now, rowing with a sack full of Jinchuriki, and all his hearts but earth gone. He touched his ring and channeled chakra into In, waiting for Pain's response. Hopefully, he would send someone to reinforce him. A single Jainin could potentially overwhelm him in his current state. Honestly, fuck Wave. Kakashi frowned under his mask. They had arrived in Wave yesterday, but things quickly became confusing. It seemed that there was a battle between the Order of the Watcher and some unknown assailants, which ended in a small earthquake. His meeting with the High Priestess was delayed due to said chaos, and when he met her, well, I'm not sure what you are talking about. He denied instantly. I came here to talk about diplomacy, not whatever you accuse me of. The woman raised an eyebrow. Then leave, Wave has no interest in playing dishonest games. We know you were the one spying on us, Zabuza fought you himself. There was only so much he could do to deny it. If he tried too hard, then he would be caught lying again. Zabuza is a notorious criminal wanted in many countries, Kakashi said carefully. He should have guessed this meeting would go sideways. It was my duty at the time to investigate him. Do you make a habit of hunting criminals in foreign nations without giving them a warning? The High Priestess asked skeptically. Wave did not have a government at the time. He argued back. How was I supposed to inform anyone? While I admit that the whole of Wave was not under the control of the Order at the time, the area where you fought Zabuza was inside the territory of the capital city. She countered easily. Which was already under our control and authority. She really was playing hardball, wasn't she? Hitaki Kakashi, she started with a sigh. Konoha was caught spying on Wave. We are willing to forgive that if you admit your wrongdoings, but we will not deal with your village if you keep lying to us. Damn it, he really wasn't cut out for diplomacy. I cannot apologize for doing my job, but I am sorry if the results were less than favorable. He tried to be as diplomatic as possible, though his tone still came off as stiff. The High Priestess was about to reply when the door to the meeting room slammed open, and a woman wearing simple clothes ran in, looking satisfied. Haruka, I finished interrogating the hunter nins. They were hunting the Jinchuriki. She cut herself off upon seeing Kakashi. Oh. I didn't know you had guests. Kakashi stared at her for a long moment, his mind processing what she said. I'll come back later then. The woman declared happily before skipping away. The high priestess sighed loudly, and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Sorry about that, Hikari is enthusiastic about her job, Haruka explained. She gets excited easily. That's fine. Kakashi muttered, was that purposely done? To show Konoha that they could repel a team of hunter-nin strong enough to fight a Jinchuriki? And also that they had a Jinchuriki in the country? Was it a lie? To make Wave seem stronger than they are? Was it a genuine mistake? Why did the high priestess have to be such a good actor? The whole looking underneath the underneath was much more annoying when he had to make sure the other party was friendly. His headache was getting worse already. Honestly, fuck Wave. Chapter 25, Life in Wave. Saiken was exploring the capital of Wave. He liked this body, it was a lot easier to move around in than his tailed beast form. A little inconvenient at times, though, since he needed to eat and sleep now. He had already mastered the transformation jutsu, and while he lacked the chakra of his old form, he still had more than enough to keep up the transformation the whole day. That left him free to wander about and observe humans as much as possible. He spent most of his time watching people go about their lives, merchants haggling over prices, children playing games with each other. It reminded him of life when father was still alive, before the sage separated them. Back then, he would sometimes sit atop the roofs of buildings and watch over father's family from above. This felt similar in some ways, it made him feel content, knowing there were still those who followed father's and Ajura's teachings. But he was sometimes confused by the actions of other humans, like these two men currently standing in front of him. Listen up, boy. The man growled menacingly. I know you're hiding some money under that little shirt of yours. Yeah, and if you don't want us to get angry. The second thug added as they both loomed over Saiken menacingly. Should Saiken be scared right now? He could easily fight them off. They were far weaker than even a young Utakata. Saiken slowly looked around, the alley they were in was narrow, so there was no way out unless he went through the thugs. That seemed rude, so he didn't want to do it. No thank you. He finally replied politely after a few seconds. The first thug scowled at him. What did you say? No, thank you. Saiken repeated himself again, maybe this was one of the humans with defective hearing? No, thank you. The second thug asked incredulously before stepping forward aggressively. Listen here, boy, either you give me your money, or we beat it out of ya. Ah. Now Saiken understood, these men were robbers was what they were called. They wanted his money so they could buy things. Well, he didn't have any money. When he needed food, he just went to the Watcher's shrine and asked for some. I do not possess currency. He replied truthfully, before brightening up. I know where you can acquire some, though. Currency can be acquired by exchanging goods or services with other humans. There are multiple places where humans gather to do that, one such place is. Saiken didn't get to finish his sentence because the first thug punched him in the face. It didn't really hurt, it felt more like a light tap against his cheek. Oi, you trying to piss me off? The first thug yelled out, raising his fist again. You think this is funny? Halt, criminal scum! A voice yelled out from above them, everyone looked up to see a crow. It was twice as big as a normal crow, the only notable thing about it was that it wore a black scarf with golden stars on it. Men of ill deeds, behold your reckoning, my vengeance is now upon you. The crow squawked loudly as it jumped off its perch and landed between Saiken and the thugs. The two robbers just stared at it in confusion for a few seconds before the first one started warily backing away. My dark arts shall shatter your bones, and send you screaming into the pits of hell. The crow declared proudly. I'm getting the fuck out of here. The second thug spoke up nervously, running out of the alleyway without looking back. The first thug hesitated before following his friend. The crow huffed angrily and dashed forward, fast enough that Saiken had trouble keeping track of it, easily blocking off the entrance to the alleyway, causing both men to stumble backward. Fools! Do you really think you can escape from me? The crow taunted haughtily. My claws rend steel, my beak is as sharp as a sword, I am a creature of death incarnate. Saiken couldn't help but feel confused, was this creature lying? It didn't seem that powerful. It was fast, but if Saiken could still see it with this new body, he would have easily been able to swat it out of the air with a tail swipe in his old form. One of the thugs screamed loudly as he tried to kick the bird, who simply dodged effortlessly. You dare try and harm my dark feathers? Fool, you do not understand the pain it took to forge myself into a demon of terror. The crow jumped forward and head-butted the thug right between the legs, causing him to double over in pain. Even in these lands, blessed by the Watcher's light, darkness dwells in every corner. Akuma. A voice interrupted the crow. Saiken turned around to see one of the people that worshipped the being he met. This one wore a suit of leather armor and the same white blank mask most wore. I thought we talked about this. The crow huffed defensively before it spread its wings dramatically. I am but a humble servant of the Watcher, bringing justice wherever I may go. It squawked out in an affronted tone. The masked man sighed audibly under his mask. Akuma, stop monologuing to random criminals, he scolded firmly. You have a job to do, don't forget that. The crow hung its head in resignation at the reprimand. The masked man shook his head as if he had seen this many times before. He then turned his attention to Saiken. Young man, are you all right? He asked kindly. These men didn't hurt you, did they? Hello, they tried to hurt me by striking at my face. Saiken replied politely. It was unsuccessful. Oh, well, that's good, I guess. The masked man replied, clearly confused. Anyway, just be careful next time, okay? There are more dangerous people than these two idiots out there. Saiken nodded agreeably, and the masked man walked over to grab the two thugs. One tried to struggle but was quickly restrained. All right, let's go now, Akuma. He ordered the crow, who chirped excitedly and took off into the sky. The masked man started dragging both men behind him with surprising ease, considering they were bigger than him and weighed more. Saiken was confused once again. Humans really are interesting creatures. I seem to have misplaced a Jinkra key. Oops. In my defense, I spent the last half a day just making sure everything was fine in Wave. Dropping a meteorite on the island was a pretty big event. I had to deal with panicked worshippers, damages from the earthquakes and a couple forest fires, which in hindsight probably were Kakuzu's doing. DP 6342. I had enough DP to maybe teleport to Kakuzu and steal back Utakata. But that would leave me with little to no DP, and then any other member of Akatsuki would be able to capture Utakata anyway, and then I was stuck in a constant back and forth until Pain flattened the capital. It was frustrating. I didn't care much for Utakata, he wasn't my friend or my worshipper, but it was still irritating to see that he got taken away. I had the choice to either enter conflict between Akatsuki and Wave or not, and both options have pros and cons. On one hand, if I saved Utakata I would start an early conflict with Akatsuki. They would know about me and treat me as a threat, but it would mean that if I convinced Utakata to stay in Wave, then I made sure that Kagaya didn't resurrect. On the other hand, did I want Kagaya to stay dead? If I let her get revived, I had the opportunity to interrogate her about her clan, and maybe even recruit her into working with me. Having someone with her powers would be invaluable if her clan does somehow end up invading. It was a choice between betting on my ability to stop Kagaya from going on a rampage, or betting on the threat of the Tsutsuki being something I could handle on my own. Chapter 26, Pain, Meet Mental Pain. I decided to check out the situation before making a choice, so I used my godly powers to locate Utakata and flew over with my crow body. Flying was pretty fast, so it only took me a couple of hours to arrive at my destination, which turned out to be a small boat heading towards the Land of Fire. Kakuzu didn't have his Akatsuki robe on, only wearing a pair of tattered pants. I also couldn't spot any of his masks. Did he lose them all? But the thing that made me internally curse was who I saw standing on the prow of the ship, staring directly at my crow form. Pain. He noticed me before I even saw him. Now he was just standing on the prow of the boat. I wondered if he put effort into looking cool or if he just did it naturally. Any normal person would have just sat down. That did mean fighting wasn't an option. I didn't have enough DP to fight Pain. He didn't react in any way, he just stared at me without moving. I did want to sow some discord in Akatsuki, so might as well talk with him. I flew closer until I was above the front of the boat and transformed into my Ayamu form, landing on the water right in front of them. Hello there. I said cheerfully. What an interesting pair of people to find in the middle of the ocean. Both of them were silent for a moment, before Pain finally spoke up. What are you? Ah, another person who noticed my lack of chakra. I really should make a body with chakra to prevent this. This is the third person that realized that, although with Kazuo it was what I wanted. Rude of you to not introduce yourself before asking others about themselves, don't you think? I asked teasingly. I am known as Pain, he stated, completely ignoring my request. What are you? You have no chakra, no soul, and yet you exist in this world. Oh, I forgot, the Rinnegan could interact with souls. Actually, now that I think about it, he had 3 techniques that could: the Naraka path, which allowed him to summon the King of Hell, the human path, which allows him to extract a person's soul from their body, and the outer path, which lets him resurrect people. Man, those eyes were fucking overpowered. Me? I am just a humble watcher, who was very interested in why you captured that young man in the boat. I answered casually. But now that I've seen those eyes, I can guess what your goal is. Pain stared at me silently. He was not someone who would play along with my needling. Sadly for him, I am a god. So instead of letting the awkward silence get to me, I let my Ayamu body stand there, in the middle of the ocean. It took about 5 minutes before Kakuzu spoke up, apparently unable to hold himself back anymore. Well, boy? He asked impatiently. Do you know why we kidnapped him? Thank you, Kakuzu, I knew I could rely on you. Yes, while you could be trying to just steal the power of the tailed beasts, there is only one thing a Rinnegan user could truly want. I said dramatically. The resurrection of the 10 tails. Pain had a small but noticeable reaction to that. He had no fucking idea of what I was talking about, after all. That is not my goal, he denied immediately. You are mistaken. Oh? Then please enlighten this humble watcher on what you are planning. I was playing a dangerous game here, since if he really wanted to, he could destroy the capital in a few seconds with his almighty push, and while it wouldn't kill me, it would leave me in a very vulnerable state. My goal is to obtain enough power to create peace, Pain stated simply. His voice was completely steady, as if he believed every word he said. And how do you plan to accomplish that? I asked curiously. Gathering the tailed beast isn't going to bring about peace. He looked at me for a moment before answering. I was tempted to use my DP to look at the real Pain. I bet Nagato had funner expressions than this puppet. I will show the world Pain, true suffering on a scale never seen before. I will create a weapon so powerful that war will become too horrible to contemplate, Pain continued. Once they forget, the weapon will be used again, a cycle of peace and reminders of pain. Honestly, hearing it in person made it both more reasonable and paradoxically more insane. Yet, wars would stop for a while after a massive catastrophe, but wiping out a large portion of people every few decades to make everyone play nice was a bit extreme. Ah, fear as a deterrent from violence. I summarized. Now, you wouldn't be trying to create this weapon by merging the 9-tailed beasts into a big statue, would you? Pain frowned slightly at my words but didn't answer. You see, there's an interesting tale about the Sage of 6 Paths, who split the chakra of the 10 tails into 9 beasts. I spoke like a storyteller, waving my hands around animatedly. And he sealed the body in the moon, and only the one who bears the sage's eyes can release the body again. Pain didn't interrupt, or blast me away, which meant he was interested in what I had to say. I also know the conditions to create a Rinnegan, want to hear them? I asked innocently. I saw Pain tense up ever so slightly. This was actually kind of fun, just dangling secrets in front of him until he bites. Speak, Watcher. He ordered. You see, you need the inheritors of the sun and moon, the sage's sons, their chakras combined with each other in one body. I spoke with fake cheerfulness. The problem is, only one inheritor can exist of each, the previous ones were pretty well known. One was named Hashirama Senju. You might know that name, I heard he was very famous. The inheritor of the moon was named Madara Uchiha, you might know him as well. I already met the current inheritors, and they are much less impressive. At this point, I was too curious, so I spent a good amount of DP to locate and look at Nagato's face. He was actually located, deep in the ocean? About 2 kilometers under the surface, inside a fleshy room. At his side stood Konan, who looked like she was listening intently to my conversation with Pain. I had to spend some more DP looking at the outside of the room. How the fuck was he doing this? Oh damn, that's a summon. He summoned a giant whale and is using it like a submarine. Damn, the Rinnegan was cool. Back to Nagato, he was clearly angry about what I said. He was pretty smart, so he likely is on the right track about the Madara that spoke to him. Anyways, the way to create a Rinnegan is simple. Be an inheritor, implant the other inheritor's cells into yourself. If you are lucky, you get a Rinnegan, easy right? Yeah, that was basically it. I didn't think telling him about Indra and Azura would make much of a difference. Nagato was having a mental battle right now, which was really funny to watch. Conan seemed worried about him, which only made it funnier. You know, now that I think about it, you are really weird, Pain. I started suddenly. You have a Rinnegan, but you aren't an inheritor, which normally means that the Rinnegan would drain your vitality, but here you are, healthy as can be. Nagato seemed to pause as he heard that, looking even more lost than before. Anyways, it's been nice chatting, but I think I overstayed my welcome, I spoke as I prepared to transform back into a crow. Hope you found this information useful. I quickly left, before he could get his thoughts back together. Nagato was utterly dumbfounded as he sat there, staring at the place where the entity had disappeared. Conan watched him silently, waiting for her best friend to speak up. It seems we need to change our plans. He finally spoke up. Either Madara or this thing is lying, and if the former is true, then I must find out what Madara is hiding from me. How? Conan asked. Do you want to confront him? Nagato shook his head slightly. No, that wouldn't work. Madara was confident no matter what, meaning he thinks he has everything accounted for, or simply doesn't fear his plans failing. Nagato silently considered his options for a moment before speaking again. Use your paper clones to find out more, send some to Wave, send some elsewhere, and try to find out any information you can about the Rinnegan and the Sage. Conan nodded in acknowledgement. She would always follow Nagato's wishes. As for me, I will continue with our current plan, Nagato announced. Until we can either confirm or disprove this creature's words. He ordered the whale to continue back to the mainland, though he knew it would be difficult to ignore the revelations that had just occurred. Oh, he almost forgot, he turned his Deva path towards Kakuzu. Kakuzu, choose, true loyalty or death. He couldn't risk Kakuzu spreading any of this if it was true. Chapter 27, Meetings and Politics. Kakashi arrived at the Hokage Tower on time for the meeting. He had only been back in the village for a couple of hours, but he didn't mind. The sooner he could finish this assignment, the sooner he could forget about Wave. He walked into the office and saw Tsunade sitting behind her desk reading some documents. She looked up when he entered the room before greeting him with a tired smile. Hello, Kakashi. She greeted him wearily. How did the mission go? Weird, Kakashi admitted. On the negotiation front, it went fine. They are willing to sell us any excess resources at a discounted price, including lumber and medical herbs. Tsunade nodded. That's good news, but what did they ask for in return? Well, that's part of the weirdness, he explained. They want permission to build a shrine either in or next to Konoha, and basic jutsu of each element. They said granting these two requests would give us 15 years of preferential trade with a set price ceiling and an amount of stock set aside for us. Tsunade frowned thoughtfully. Kakashi understood why she was confused. It was a deal that economically favored Konoha a great deal. But at the same time, they were asking for unusual things. Asking for jutsu was extremely uncommon in diplomacy, especially if they weren't a hidden village. The request for a shrine was even more so. Even though it wasn't unheard of, it was almost always reserved for countries, not hidden villages. And by specifying that the shrine didn't need to be inside the village itself, showed that they knew how sensitive their request was. What about their military strength? Tsunade finally asked after a few moments. That's also part of the weirdness, Kakashi admitted. For starters, I didn't press my luck, so all I gathered was from the mouth of the officials I dealt with or the civilians I overheard. Understandable. Tsunade said. She gestured for him to continue. Well, apparently they have the cooperation of a summon clan, crows to be specific. They were used for message delivering and security. He explained. I can confirm that Zabuza is also part of the order as a full member and not as a mercenary, training the combat side of the order, called the military wing. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. That was a good amount of information for someone that didn't press their luck. They also claimed to have captured several Hunter-nin squads targeting a Jinchuriki within Wave. Kakashi continued reluctantly. Tsunade sighed loudly before pinching the bridge of her nose. Did you confirm these claims? She asked tiredly. No, after the earthquake that turned out to be a glowing meteorite, I didn't want to press my luck. Tsunade looked at him in disbelief. Kakashi knew he could say goodbye to his early leave. Start from the beginning, be as detailed as possible. There it was, Tsunade transformed from a worn-out woman into her serious cage mode. The travel to Wave itself was uneventful. He began relaying his experience as honestly and precisely as possible, knowing any missing detail would lead to more questions and wasted time. 10 days later. Amikiri watched as Yamazuki nervously fiddled with his armor. He had grown more confident as the mission progressed. It took them 2 weeks to reach the land of demons, and in those 2 weeks all 4 acolytes showed progress. Growing more confident now that they were not under the comforting watch of the Watcher's gaze. But it seems there were still some areas where they needed work. Yamazuki. Amikiri spoke, interrupting the man's fiddling. Calm down, the priestess of this land is said to be reasonable, and a child. She has no reason to refuse your request. Amikiri was currently shape-shifted as a normal crow, resting on Yamazuki's shoulder, while they all waited in the antechamber of the temple where the priestess resided. The acolytes were here to ask for permission to establish shrines to the Watcher and recruit members for the order in this land. Amikiri was here to convert the priestess to the worship of the Watcher behind the stars. A large wooden door swung open, revealing a tall, slender woman dressed in pink robes. She bowed politely before speaking in a soft voice. Greetings travelers, I am Maki, attendant of Lady Shin. Her eyes shifted towards Yamazuki, who quickly bowed back respectfully. My lady will see you now. The acolytes all stood up and followed Maki through the door into the inner sanctum of the temple. The room they entered had numerous torches along the walls that illuminated the darkness. In front of them was a throne-like chair with a young girl sitting on it. There were also a dozen guards lining the walls. Amikiri knew from the knowledge granted by his creator that this girl was Shin, current priestess of the land of demons. Shin looked a bit nervous herself, but she was still a child. Amikiri knew that humans were not as blessed as the Star Eaters when it came to mental maturity. You may present your case, strangers. The priestess spoke carefully, trying to sound more formal than she actually was. What brings you to my temple? We have come from the land of waves, Yamazuki replied cautiously. We wish for permission to build a few shrines for our faith and spread our teachings throughout this land. The priestess looked confused before whispering with Maki for a few moments. Why are they asking me? Amikiri heard her mutter to Maki under her breath. Shouldn't they be talking to the daimyo about this? He has final say about all this stuff. Shin was correct, but she was here as an observer, so she let the acolytes handle it. I think he does, you should ask them. Maki whispered back to her lady. Shin nodded, clearly unsure of what she should do. Why are you asking me for permission? Shouldn't you be talking to the daimyo about this? She asked confused, giving away her inexperience. Yamazuki bowed to the priestess respectfully before speaking again. Lady Shin, while legally the daimyo does hold authority over what can be built in his country, you are the one who safeguards this country's spiritual beliefs, Yamazuki explained politely. Disapproval from you would be disastrous for us, so we wish to get your approval first before approaching him. Amikiri felt pride at watching how well Yamazuki was handling himself. His earlier nervousness had evaporated, and he was now standing tall. Oh! The priestess exclaimed in realization. I see. She regained her composure and took on a more serious expression. Very well then, she said with dignity. Tell me more about your faith, then. Lady Shin, we come here as envoys of the Watcher behind the stars, who guides all of his faithful through the night, Yamazuki began. He watches over humanity from beyond the stars and nurtures them, so we may build a paradise upon this earth. Through sharing the wisdom of the Watcher, we hope to guide people into becoming better versions of themselves. To strive towards their full potential and live lives filled with happiness and peace. The Watcher has no demand of worship or sacrifice, all he wishes is for us to grow beyond what we are today. Yamazuki finished reverently. The priestess listened attentively as Yamazuki spoke passionately about his beliefs, clearly interested in what she heard. And what would these shrines be for? She asked curiously when Yamazuki finished. Would they be used purely for worship? They would serve as places of gathering, where people can congregate to learn more about the Watcher's teachings or seek guidance, Yamazuki clarified. We would also perform charity work. It was standard practice back in Wave to give out food to the hungry and medicine to the sick. Yamazuki then continued explaining some other basic things, like the training of initiates and the hierarchy of the order. The priestess seemed satisfied by his explanation and nodded slowly. I shall endorse your request for now. She said seriously. She then gestured for Maki to come closer. Maki will guide you to the daimyo, good luck on your mission. The acolytes bowed to the priestess as one before following Maki out of the room. Amikiri hopped off Yamazuki's shoulder and landed on the ground, the guards and Shin watching him curiously. Now that the acolytes were gone, he was alone with Shin and her entourage. Shin looked at the guards warily. Taraho, could you take this crow back to the envoys group? She asked nervously. Amikari let out an amused chirp before interrupting. There is no need, Lady Shin. She jumped from her chair in shock at hearing him talk. I am here to speak with you alone. What? Shin squeaked out in surprise, her eyes going wide. Amikari ignored her undignified reaction and continued. My name is Amikari, I am one of the Watcher's children, here to make a deal with you. She declared formally, bowing as best a crow could. Chapter 28, Watching the Land of Demons. There was a tense silence in the room as everyone stared at the talking crow. Amikari stood there patiently, waiting for the priestess to gather herself. Eventually, she did. A deal? She asked cautiously, clearly still surprised, but in the elemental nations talking animals weren't unheard of. Yes, I have studied the practices of your temple, you do not worship any gods, rather appeasing and celebrating the spirits of this land. Amikari began. The greatest of spirits are honored with an annual festival by your faith. Shin nodded carefully, observing the bird warily. If you accept this deal, I would ask you to add the Watcher behind the stars to your festival, and honor him just as much as your great spirits. Shin was even more confused. Amikari noted, it was understandable, it was a very unusual request. But as her creator said, the shrines built by Yamazuki were for the people of this land, while the festivals were for their faith. If the spiritual authority in this land worshipped the Watcher, even partially, then it would prevent much of the normal unrest that happens upon a new religion spreading. What would I gain from accepting this deal? She asked nervously. I mean no offense but... She trailed off. Amikari understood what she meant. Shin didn't want to be rude by asking what's in it for me, outright. I shall personally hand you MRY's followers' heads. She replied plainly. All of them shall cease to exist. Everyone in the room paused. What? Shin muttered out in disbelief. How? How could you possibly claim to accomplish something like that? Amikari flesh shifted, her wings and legs elongated, her body became bigger, claws forming on her wingtips on her forehead. A third eye opened, shining with golden light. When it finished, Amikari now stood almost 5 meters tall. The guards shifted their stance, drawing their weapons, while Shin sat there, completely frozen in fear. I am Amikari, second-born of the Watcher behind the stars, Star Eater, and I have been given the task of giving death to those who deserve it. I will repeat myself again. She said plainly. I shall give you his followers' lives. The room was completely silent as no one moved. Then a few seconds later, Shin suddenly jerked, her eyes becoming a pair of purple kaleidoscopes. She stared off into nothing for a second before returning to normal. The guards tensed even more, they knew what that meant. Lady Shin had received a prophecy. Shin looked at Amikari, she seemed conflicted, before seemingly coming to a conclusion. Deal. Amikari let out an amused chirp, which in her true form sounded more like a rumble than anything else. She then shrunk back down to her smaller form, much to the relief of everyone in the room. Lady Shin, are you sure? The guard named Taraho asked cautiously. Yes, Shin answered confidently. I trust this being, and their mission. The guard didn't seem convinced but kept silent. Amikari bowed respectfully before flying out of the window. It was time to hunt some demons. Honestly, that was easier than I thought it would be. The plan was simple, the land of demons wasn't monotheistic, so getting the shrine maidens there to add me to their pantheon was never going to be hard. The spirits and demons they feared and worshipped already changed every century or two, it wouldn't be strange for me to be added onto the list. Convincing Shin and her order to worship me on the same level as their main spirits was also fairly easy, just had to give Shin a vision, the same as she normally got from her eyes, that after she rejected the deal, MRY's followers would kill her. She already hated MRY, so she would gladly take the deal once the alternative seemed worse. Especially since MRY's little following already has tried to assassinate her multiple times. Her ability was pretty interesting, it sent information from her future self when they died back to the present one, thus giving her a lot of knowledge on how she might die. Kind of fucked up if you ask me. I could see with a few more years of watching herself die and the only way to prevent it being to sacrifice other people, she would turn into a cold-hearted bitch. But as far as I could gather, at the current time she had only used this ability a dozen or so times. I remember from the original timeline she had used it about 100 times, so I guess MRY's little gang ramped up the assassination attempts later on in their plan. Oh well, if she ever ended up becoming my head priestess in the land of demons, I would make sure she never used that ability again. My followers deserve to die happy and without regrets. I shifted my attention back to Wave. I didn't want to split my attention too much, so I would have to trust Amikiri and the acolytes. Although loaded up to the gills as they were with my blessings, I should expect nothing less. A few hours later, Amikiri was currently using her new blessing to stalk a member of MRY's cult. It allowed her to hide inside shadows, completely hiding her presence as long as she stayed inside them. It was perfect for this kind of hunt. The man below her was called Sugin. He was not important to the organization, his responsibility was to get the equipment to the fanatics that would try to assassinate Shin. But he was the link to the rest of his group, so all Amikiri had to do was follow him until he led her to them. Luckily for her, there was a new meeting being held today, talking about the acolytes, as apparently they had gotten permission from the daimyo after Amikiri separated from them. So now they were discussing if the order was going to be an obstacle in their plans, and how they would handle it if they became one. Of course, Sugin wasn't actually part of the meeting, but he had been notified that a meeting was held and that he should go and receive his new orders. Which meant Amikiri could just follow him and then follow the person giving him orders until she found the gang of 4 and Yomi. After that, she could kill everyone from the top down. She watched Sugin walk through the woods outside a small village. He eventually reached a small shack that was hidden by the overgrown plants around it. Amikiri's shadow traveled into the house and settled herself next to the window. Inside, she could see Sugin standing in front of an older man who seemed annoyed at having to deal with Sugin. So, what is this meeting about? Sugin asked, sounding like he didn't actually care all that much. The old man rolled his eyes in annoyance. Some cult from a different country got permission to build shrines from the priestess and the daimyo. So? Sugin asked, confused. Why is that our problem? Because we don't know anything about them, the old man snapped irritably. So just sit tight for a week or two, make sure none of your group messes anything up, and wait for me to get back to you. Fine. Sugin said dismissively, clearly annoyed at being told to just sit tight. He walked out without saying another word and slammed the door shut behind him, leaving Amikiri alone with her target. The old man sighed tiredly before walking into the other room and opening a hidden latch in the floor, revealing a tunnel underneath it. Amikiri patiently followed him through the tunnels. This was likely going to take quite a bit of legwork, but she was fine with that. She wasn't created with the capability of feeling boredom, after all. Chapter 29, The Gang of 3. 2 days later. It took a little bit, but eventually Amikiri found herself in front of a small hut, deep inside the forest. After following a letter chain throughout the whole country, she had finally discovered what she presumed were 2 members of the Gang of 4. She silently stalked her prey until she stood over them. The first one was called Kusuna. He wore the white robes typical of the Gang of 4 and had long pink hair tied up in a ponytail. He looked focused as he was reading the letter that Amikiri had followed here. The second was called Shizuku, also wearing white robes and had orange hair that reached just past her shoulders. She was standing next to Kusuna, arms crossed, while watching him read the letter with disinterest. Amikiri transferred into Kusuna's shadow before splitting herself into 2, one of them staying hidden inside Kusuna's shadow, and the other traveling through the shadows into the forest behind the hut. After traveling a good distance away from the hut, Amikiri sprouted out of the shadows in her true form before letting out a loud rumbling chirp. What the fuck was that? Shizuku asked, sounding tense. That didn't sound like any animal I know. Kusuna put down the letter and stood up. Silence, and be prepared. He pulled out a pair of scalpels from his robe. Shizuku nodded and drew her kunao, keeping guard while they waited for something to happen. They didn't have to wait long. Amikiri let out another, louder chirp as she approached the hut, intentionally letting out heavy footsteps along with it. That thing is coming closer, Shizuki noted. It sounds big. Amikiri finally reached the hut, looming over it with her full 5 meters in height. The 2 cultists tensed as they spotted her through the window. Shizuki immediately started weaving hand seals, before shouting out. Water style, water dragon bullet. She inhaled deeply before unleashing a large dragon head made of water from her mouth. The attack shot towards Amikiri at high speeds, but she just tanked through it, letting herself be pushed into a tree that cracked under the force. Amikiri simply rose up again and screeched at them threateningly, rushing forward and swiping at the hut with one of her claws, tearing half the building away like it was made of paper. Kusuna reacted instantly, a dark snake made of twisted flesh flowing out from his sleeve and attaching itself to Shizuki's neck. A couple of seconds passed as the snake burrowed into her neck. Her skin turned almost white, blue stripes covered her face, flowing down her body, and she grinned widely. "Let me help you, little birdie," she cooed sadistically. "With your demise." She raised her hand, and water tendrils emerged from the ground around Amikiri, shooting forward to impale her. Amikiri jumped up and avoided the tendrils, using her power of flight to throw herself straight at Shizuki. Shizuki immediately created a giant bubble of water in front of her, intending for Amikiri to get trapped inside of it, but instead of flying into it like she wanted, Amikiri simply flew over it. As she was about to reach Shizuki, a wave of black snakes grabbed her and pulled her away from the claw swipe that would have cut the woman in half. Kusuna glared at Shizuki. "Stop trying to play with your food. Just kill it already." He turned his attention towards Amikiri, who let out another screech and charged forward. "Fine," Shizuki said sulkily, before weaving more hand seals and raising her arms. A large amount of water began pouring out of the surrounding forest, enough to form a small lake. She then formed one last seal and clapped her hands together, which made the water flow upward into the sky, creating a massive dome of water around Amikiri. Water style. The top of the dome bulged upwards, a massive pillar of water forming, towering over the trees. "God's hammer." With those words, the pillar shot down, shaking the ground and the trees with its force as it hit Amikiri with the force of a mountain. The dome turned red as blood started mixing with the water. Shizuki's skin turned back to normal, the white returning to a normal tan color and the blue stripes vanishing. "I hate this damn jutsu," she grumbled out, holding her head as if she had a headache. "Why is it so exhausting to use?" She looked at Kusuna with an irritated expression. But as the dome was collapsing, a beam of white fire shot out from where Amikiri was trapped, piercing straight through Shizuki. She reached up with her remaining arm, looking at the half of her chest that was now missing, in shock. She didn't get to finish her sentence before she collapsed, dead. Kusuna cursed and immediately jumped into the trees. The water flowed away, revealing Amikiri's current state. Her lower body was gone, only her upper half remaining, though that was also badly damaged. Amikiri screeched loudly, even louder than before, while white flames gathered in her beak. Kusuna didn't stop to wait and see what happened next. He immediately started running away, trying to get as far away as possible. The Amikiri behind him raged and roared, crawling forward with its arms, but Kusuna knew it would die soon, so he kept running. Eventually, the roaring faded away, allowing him to finally let himself relax slightly. The Amikiri next to the destroyed hut stilled for a second before disappearing, leaving nothing behind. And the Amikiri inside Kusuna's shadow waited patiently for the dog to go back to its master. Chapter 30, A Light Rain of Plasma. Kusuna eventually reached a small clearing, in which stood a small house. He breathed deeply before walking towards it. He knocked on the door and waited for an answer. A few moments later, the door swung open, revealing a tall man dressed in the robes of the Gang of Four. "What happened?" Setsuna asked sharply upon seeing the haggard Kusuna. "And where is Shizuki?" "Shizuku is dead," Kusuna responded without hesitation. "A giant crow attacked us out of nowhere. Shizuki managed to cripple it with God's hammer, but it killed her afterward." Setsuna narrowed his eyes, before turning around and gesturing for Kusuna to follow. Kusuna followed him inside, shutting the door behind him. "I will get Yomi-sama and Jitai," he stated, turning towards the room at the end of the hall, while Kusuna collapsed in a nearby chair. Jitai emerged from a side room, wearing his veil and white robes as usual. Setsuna said something happened. "What?" he asked curiously, watching Kusuna tiredly rubbing his temples. "Wait for Yomi-sama, I'll explain then." Kusuna sighed out. Jitai shrugged and sat down next to him, waiting for Yomi to emerge from the room Setsuna disappeared into. A few minutes passed before Setsuna returned, this time followed by a dark-haired man wearing a long grey jacket and baggy black pants. Kusuna and Jitai immediately got up, kneeling respectfully before him. "Rise," Yomi commanded calmly. "You may stand." The two quickly did so, bowing once more before standing straight. Yomi turned his gaze towards Kusuna. "Now, what is this about Shizuki dying?" Kusuna retold the story of the events that had transpired earlier. But as he reached the part where he gave his chakra injection to Shizuki, Yomi interrupted him. "Kusuna, why is your shadow darker than it should be?" He asked calmly, which confused Kusuna greatly. Impressive. A voice spoke, coming from Kusuna's shadow. Everyone instantly went on guard, but before they could react, Amikiri's arm emerged from the shadows and grabbed onto Kusuna. He let out a cry of panic before getting dragged into the darkness with an audible cracking sound. Everyone in the room immediately jumped back, watching his shadow with shock and caution. 2 Amikiris burst out from the shadows, blowing the small house apart like a bomb had gone off. The 3 surviving members of the gang scattered as pieces of wood flew everywhere. They regrouped again a few meters away, where they stood together while facing the 2 giant crows. Amikiri. Yomi said calmly, with barely any emotion. The second-born of the Watcher behind the stars. I see your network has infiltrated deep into this land. Amikiri bowed in response to his words. Unfortunately for you, I do not monologue. Amikiri had received 3 blessings from her creator for this mission. One was an increase to her size, speed, strength, and toughness. The second was her ability to travel through shadows and hide inside them, it even allowed to store other things inside for a short period of time. Too long inside and they would start being crushed. And the last one was that she could now store her beam as balls of light and fire. When she willed it, they would burst out, releasing the stored laser in the direction she wanted. It took 2 hours for the letter to be picked up by its courier, it took her 11 seconds to create one orb. As she finished talking, 655 stars in the sky burst with blinding white light. Everything within 100 meters was incinerated, and anything outside of that got blown away by a shockwave of heat and force. Amikiri looked around, making sure that none of them had survived. She spotted a half-burned body crawling out from under some rubble. The head was mostly burned off, but she recognized the remaining clothes as belonging to Yomi. She shot forward, stabbing her claws into his neck, pulling off the rest of his head. He convulsed violently for a moment before going still. Amikiri chirped victoriously as she looked at her first trophy. Her mission was complete. I was currently working on a couple of small projects in Wave. The first was actually making a strong body for myself, using crow bodies and just loading them up with DP was good and all, but if I made a body capable of using chakra myself, it would be much cheaper to use when facing anything short of the strongest. It was expensive as fuck since I made the body as perfect as I could. Thankfully, I had enough people capable of using chakra that I could grab the best parts from each person and copy them onto my body. The main trouble was just making it work without DP being a band-aid. I wanted this body to be as free of it as possible so it could be used as long as I was alive, even if my religion got wiped off the map in a split second and I lost all my DP for some reason. Creator. My thoughts were interrupted by Amikiri's voice inside my head. I shifted my attention towards her, noticing she was currently sitting in the middle of a scorched clearing. Oh hey, a dead body, did she already succeed? What's up? I asked, curious about what she wanted. I have successfully destroyed the gang of 4, she answered. And their master Yomi. She did succeed, my kids keep proving how awesome they are. Good job Ami. I praised her mentally, watching her preen happily. Is there something you need? Yes, it has come to my attention that MRY has a much bigger following than expected. I have captured the member of the gang of 4 that was in charge of passing orders around. With him, I can hunt down all his followers one by one. You need help interrogating him? I asked curiously. Or do you want more people to hunt down the stragglers? Amikiri paused for a second, before answering. Wise as always, creator. Ah, she was going to make me blush. I would like assistance in extracting information. I will work with Shin and her guards to root out MRY's minions from this country. It would be better if they participated in the purge. Well, that is true, guiding their hands toward killing the cultists would lead to more goodwill from Shin and her people, just showing up and declaring them dead and gone wouldn't have the same impact. Ah. That would be expensive. The most efficient thing would be to transport Hikari over there to help Amikiri interrogate the man. After all, she had a purposely built blessing for exactly that. You know, it's so rare that my kids ask for help, I can't say no to them. Alright Ami, I'll send you Hikari in the morning if she agrees. I told her, watching her chirp happily. Just make sure to keep a tight hold on the guy until then. Understood, creator. I think Hikari was currently asleep, but I will just send my crow body and inform her on the morrow. Chapter 31, Gang of None. Hikari had been awake for a couple of hours now. She had spent the entire night organizing the new training of her order. Now that they were expanding, the old guard had to learn how to train new recruits properly. She was interrupted by a certain crow flying through the window, which she recognized immediately. A deep bow followed before she let him speak. "Greetings, Hikari," the messenger said formally. "Amikari has requested help from you for her mission." That made Hikari tense up a little. A Star Eater asking for her help meant someone was refusing to talk, an unwise decision. "Of course, I will set out this afternoon." "No need," the messenger responded with an amused chirp. "I will be sending you there directly. A normal trip would be too long for this to be viable." "Oh." Hikari was caught off guard. She sometimes forgot that the Watcher and his divine creations were not afraid of using their powers liberally. Then I am ready whenever." The messenger nodded, and began leaking black liquid from his body, which spread outwards before engulfing Hikari in its embrace. Hikari closed her eyes and waited patiently. It felt like she was being suspended in some sort of jelly for a few seconds, before it suddenly released her. When she opened her eyes again, she saw herself at the edge of a small clearing. The ground was scorched black and there was rubble spread across the ground. Sitting in the center of the clearing was Amikari in her true form, watching her with 3 golden eyes. She bowed her head slightly in respect. "Greetings, Amikari." Amikari returned the gesture by bowing as well. "Hikari," she greeted simply. "I have temporarily trapped the prisoner inside my shadows. He is some sort of medical specialist, so once I remove him from there, be careful." Hikari nodded solemnly as she focused on her first blessing. Her form faded from sight as she silently prepared to use her second blessing. She watched Amikari plunge her claw into her shadow and pull out a badly damaged body. As Amikari held him up in her claws, Hikari inspected the man closely. He was covered in bruises. It looked like he had been crushed by something. "I apologize for the damage," Amikari spoke up after seeing the state of the prisoner. "I had intended to release you sooner, but you kept healing yourself." The robbed man groaned in pain before weakly trying to struggle in her grip. "You, bitch!" He managed to gasp out weakly before coughing out blood. Hikari was sure Amikari didn't actually feel sorry, she just wanted to be polite about it. She ignored further conversation and concentrated on her second blessing. She saw the threads making up someone's soul appear over the man. This blessing allowed her to control other people by pulling on the threads that make up their very being, making them move like puppets. It took a bit of time, and it was hard on those who were strong of will and body, but she had plenty of time. The clearing well into silence, Amikari holding on to the man, while Hikari stood there motionless and invisible, concentrating intensely. Eventually, he would be under her control, and she would be able to read his memories from him like an open book. Shin was currently in the middle of praying in one of the temples dedicated to the spirits of this land. This one belonged to the mountain's heart, which blessed the mountains with life-giving waters. It was located near the top of Mount Soragami, which provided fresh water to the entirety of the land of demons, due to its size and height. The mountain's heart was one of the most revered spirits, next to Kind Tree and the Sleeping River. Shin let out a sigh as she finished her prayer. She felt tired, not just physically, but also mentally. After receiving the vision about how she should accept Amikari's deal, Shin had felt conflicted. It was clear that MRY's cult would kill her if she didn't accept it. But at the same time, it felt like defeat to her, to take an offer from an unknown creature because it would save her life. It made her feel weak. She shook her head and stood up. It was still better than the people around her sacrificing themselves for her. At least she could rest after today. She didn't need to do anything for the next few days. She bowed before the mountain's heart shrine one last time before leaving the temple. Maki and Taraho were waiting outside, ready to escort her down the mountain. "Lady Shin, please be careful while walking down," Taraho reminded her seriously. Shin frowned. She had walked this path dozens of times now. It wasn't that dangerous. "Shut up, I know," she told him annoyed. Taraho bowed his head slightly in response. They reached the bottom of the mountain an hour later, by which time Shin was feeling more refreshed than when she started. Being outside usually did that for her. A guard ran up to them as they approached the temple complex. "Lady Shin," he greeted hurriedly before bowing quickly. Shin gestured at him impatiently, wanting him to continue. "What is it?" she asked, annoyed. The guard looked nervous before looking at the ground. The crow returned. "It's waiting in the antechamber." Shin felt her breath hitch for a second. Amikari was back already? She couldn't have finished MRY's followers in just a few days, could she? Well, with how big she was. Lady Shin? Maki asked worriedly as Shin zoned out. I am fine. She forced herself to calm down. Assemble the guards in the main chamber, I shall meet Amikiri shortly. Maki nodded before rushing off, while Taraho followed behind her. The other guard turned around and ran back to his post. Hikari was standing behind Amikiri, invisible. She would need to be here to control their prisoner, he was now just a puppet. She and Amikiri had already discussed how to play this situation, their prisoner would confess in front of everyone to make sure MRY's cult wasn't allowed to hide. After that, he would attempt to escape and be tragically killed by Amikiri. Her ability to control people was too precious to reveal to anyone, even people would likely be their allies. The doors at the other end of the room opened up, and the priestess entered the room with 4 guards close behind her. Amikiri. She greeted politely as they reached them. You've returned sooner than I expected. I am close to finishing my mission, Lady Shin, Amikiri said respectfully. I killed all the leaders of MRY's cult last night and captured one alive. Shin looked slightly disbelieving, it's only been 2 days. I have need of more people, the network they established is vast, and I alone am not enough to hunt them all down. Amikiri continued. Shin hummed thoughtfully. Do you have any information on where they are? Amikiri nodded before pulling out a large scroll from her shadow. This contains most of the locations of MRY's cells, the names and positions of their agents, and some other minor details that should help in rooting them out. She explained. I suggest we act fast, the absence of their leadership will cause them to panic soon. Shin's eyes widened at how much Amikiri had already gathered. But she quickly composed herself and accepted the scroll with a nod. Would it be possible for me to speak with your prisoner? She asked hesitantly, looking up at Amikiri nervously. Amikiri bowed slightly. Of course, Lady Shin. Amikiri stated before turning around and plunging her claw into her shadow, pulling out a battered-looking man bound in rope. This is Kusuna, he was responsible for coordinating MRY's followers between missions. Amikiri introduced. Speak. Hikari focused on the man, now just a puppet, and made him speak. Why yes. The man said weakly, staring blankly at the floor. I was responsible for distributing information to MMRY's cult. Kusuna proceeded to explain every bit of knowledge he had about the group, from how they operated, how many members there were, what their goals were. Everything. It took a couple of hours, but when he finished talking, everyone was silent. After a moment, Amikiri spoke up. Before we start raiding all of these locations, I recommend dealing with the traitors you have amongst your guards. She stated plainly. You have the names, I will help if needed. Shin was clenching her hands tightly as she looked at the ground. Why were there so many? Were her mother and herself really so hated? That they would allow MRY back into this world? No, she couldn't think like that. She had to be strong. Hikari saw that Amikiri blinked twice, which was their signal. Kusuna began using a chakra scalpel behind his back to cut his binds. They came undone with ease, allowing him to escape. Kusuna instantly got up and rushed towards Shin with a chakra scalpel around his hand. He didn't reach her, Amikiri swiped her claw through him, tearing out most of his guts as he was sent flying across the room. Shin flinched at the sound of him hitting the wall and falling to the ground. Hikari silently slipped out of the room, still invisible, while everyone's attention was on the body. Amikiri would handle it from here, using her negligence as an excuse to work closer with Shin and her guards to exterminate MRY's cult. Chapter 32, Newer Body, Newer Me. I had just finished building my first full-fledged body. A masterpiece of art, biology, and science, I must say. The hours spent trying shit out until I found the perfect combination of traits were all worth it. Now I was the proud owner of a brand new vessel for myself. One that I could train and strengthen without having to worry about how much DP it would cost. I now stood 180 centimeters tall, had black hair tied back into a ponytail, fair skin, and was dressed in simple grey robes. The intention was to look average. If I needed to look impressive later, the drip always provides. But sadly, I couldn't just go out and start doing shit. There was still one tiny detail left. Actually training. Thankfully, I had asked Zabuza and Haku to write down little instructions on all the techniques they knew. Well, Haruka asked after I told her to make a library for our military wing. Eventually we would outgrow just training people in person, and these instructions will serve as good templates for techniques. Konoha also agreed to give us the techniques we asked for, nothing too amazing, but we had about 100 manuals, ranging from E rank to C rank, including at least one of each element. So now I would have to sit down and actually learn how to use chakra. It shouldn't be that much of a problem, thanks to my new body. Chakra control and capacity were genetic to a degree after all. I wish I had examined Sakura while she was in wave, might have been able to get that monstrous control she has naturally. But I knew enough about chakra from observing my followers and Zabuza to know the theory. It was just a matter of practice now. Wave was also doing well, the wings were all growing, the military wing was up to 800, although I feel like it will slow down soon. There aren't that many people that want to live a life of fighting and constant training. The intelligence wing expanded enough that Hikari couldn't run it on her own anymore, so the most loyal and competent were being promoted to higher positions. The medical wing was doing amazing, while my blessing of comprehension was good when you wanted to be a good fighter, but that also required a strong body and a large chakra capacity, which required a good deal of time. Being a good chakra doctor required knowledge and chakra control, two things my blessing helped with massively. I was proud of Kazuo's work, he had really built something great there. In a year or two we would rival even the best in the elemental nations in terms of medical ninjutsu. And lastly, the economic wing, I felt sorry for them, with the money from GAT now ours to use, and with the bridge being finished, they couldn't rest. Every day more merchants were trying to use Wave as a trading hub, they also had to use GAT-S to improve Wave, managing the expansion of towns and cities, surveying land for new villages, building infrastructure, and so on. It was going to be hell for the next couple of months, but Wave will grow and prosper, that was for sure. So now, I am going to sit my ass down in the middle of a forest and learn how to use chakra, and then I'm going to go on vacation. Maybe I'll visit Rin? Time travel would be interesting to see. Yamozuki looked at the small cave opening. This was reportedly the last group of MRYS followers in the land of demons, the remnants that banded together as they fled from the purge happening. The Watcher was surely looking over them, as the purge was more successful than they could have hoped. The acolytes were not largely involved, but the honored Amikiri has requested his aid in this endeavor, and he would not say no to the Watcher's children. I see why I was specifically requested, he commented quietly, eyes glancing towards the cave entrance. Taraho raised his eyebrows curiously, watching him closely as the rest of the guards stood around silently. Indeed? What is the reason? Taraho asked politely. Every acolyte receives a direct blessing from the Watcher, mine is particularly suitable for this scenario. Yamozuki explained calmly. My blessings excels in close quarters. Yamozuki started stretching before drawing his Otaki. Are there any chakra-capable fighters in that group? He asked. At least one, she is the reason they escaped, she used fire jutsu to hold off the shrine guards for long enough for them to escape, Taraho answered grimly. Yamozuki hummed thoughtfully, eyes staring at the cave entrance. Taraho-san, stay outside and do not let anyone escape, do not let anyone enter the cave, they will die if they do so. With those words, Yamozuki dashed into the cave, disappearing into its darkness. Yamozuki didn't look back, sprinting forward without slowing down. Zabuza-sensei had been clear, speed was a great advantage for a swordsman, only beat by stealth in Zabuza's opinion. Yamozuki was not suited to the silent killing techniques, but he was told he had great talent for the blade, so his training had focused on skill, then speed, and finally strength. He found the first enemy after 2 minutes of running through the caves. A single sentry stood there, armed with a small axe. The man noticed him when he got closer, but it was already too late. Yamozuki didn't give the man any time to react, a single slice was all that was needed, the man's head dropping to the ground. There would be no survivors. Yamozuki continued moving, eventually reaching a makeshift door made from wood. He could hear several people talking behind it. We should not be waiting around, they will eventually find us. Someone said angrily. Well, what else are we supposed to do? A different voice yelled back. There's no way we can escape in the state we're in now. Silence. A third one ordered loudly. There will be no running, MRY-sama is testing our loyalty and faith. How can you say that? The first one spoke up again. Our leaders were killed by that damn monster. They found out every hideout. He didn't get to finish his sentence before Yamozuki kicked down the door, surprising them. In the large cave, there were about a dozen people, most of them looking tired. In the center sat an old woman dressed in white robes. Yamozuki scanned the cave, only one exit which he was currently blocking, perfect. He focused on his blessing, it began manifesting as flames around his blade, then on his body. It started dripping down onto the ground, forming a pool of liquid fire that started spreading outward. What the fuck? One of the men that was yelling earlier yelped out in shock, they all stared at him in alarm. Yamozuki did not think too badly of them for this, before he had received his blessing, he too would have been shocked if his enemy suddenly set himself on fire and didn't die. He ignored the threats and questions they were shouting at him, focusing solely on his task. The room started to get hotter, and the enemy realized that this liquid fire would flood this cave eventually. That was when they panicked. The old woman jumped up from her seat, drawing a handful of kunao from her robes and hurling them at Yamozuki. Yamozuki easily deflected them, but that distraction allowed 3 other enemies to charge forward, all armed with a variety of weapons. They did not reach him, the lake of flames surged forward and consumed them in an instant. They screamed in agony for a few seconds before succumbing to the heat. It was almost pitiful, how easy it was to kill these people, they had no chance against Yamozuki, maybe if this wasn't an enclosed space they might have escaped, but now. This was nothing more than a slaughter. More of the cultists attacked, only to be consumed by his liquid flames. The old woman attempted to fight back with fire jutsu, but they were colder than his flames and thus ineffective. Eventually, he had accumulated enough fire and swung his sword upwards, the pool of flames surging to the ceiling, then he thrust his otaki forward. A tidal wave of fire washed over everyone in the cave, quickly cutting off any screams. Yamozuki breathed out slowly, standing still as he surveyed the burning cave, making sure no one was left alive. Once satisfied, he exited the cave, smoke was now billowing outwards from the entrance. He frowned, his clothes would smell like ashes now. Yamozuki-san. Taraho greeted respectfully as he walked up to him. You didn't suffer any injuries? Yamozuki shook his head. No, I am unharmed. He stated simply. I shall report to Amikiri that our mission is complete, you should do the same for Shinsama. Taraho smiled slightly and bowed. Of course, we thank the acolytes for their assistance in this matter. He said gratefully. Yamozuki nodded, satisfied with his work. Any day when he serves the Watcher is a good day. Chapter 33, Pain, meet a century of manipulation. And in the last part, it mentions that the sage split the tree of demons into 9 branches, each sealed inside a temple, eternally guarded by 9 beasts to protect us from its wrath and prevent its resurrection. Nagato was angry? Disappointed? Maybe regretful? He stared down at the stone floor, memories flashing through his mind of Konan and Yahiko and himself playing together, under the watchful eyes of Jiraiya-sensei. His hands clenched tightly as he recalled everything that had happened since then, all the effort and planning he put into his goal. It isn't a confirmation, Konan spoke up carefully. But it is another point in favor of this theory. We should not fool ourselves, Konan. Nagato said tiredly. This is the 6th source mentioning something being split in 9 parts, and the 4th mentioning that said thing would resurrect if all 9 parts were reunited, all from different lands, all written centuries ago. Konan looked away from him, unsure how to respond to that. How much was I manipulated into? Nagato asked quietly. A tool to gather as many tailed beasts as possible until these eyes killed me. His voice rose as he continued speaking. If we had looked before all the evidence had been washed away by time, how many manipulations would we have uncovered? If I died, how long would it have taken Madara to find someone else to use these eyes? My dream a lie, built on nothing but my arrogance and the lies of another. He roared out in fury, chakra cracking the floor below him. Konan flinched back at his outburst. This was the first time in years she had seen Nagato like this, uncontrolled and emotional. Nagato. She started, but stopped herself from continuing. What could she say? Everything they worked for. I have to know for sure. He suddenly said after calming down slightly. Bring me the Jinkra key. Konan hesitated briefly before nodding and disappearing. Nagato waited silently, his mind racing with all the different revelations. After a few minutes of waiting, Konan returned with Utakata, bound in seals and asleep. Bring him closer. Nagato commanded as he ripped his hand out of his medical puppet. Konan wordlessly floated the unconscious man closer. He sluggishly raised his hand, fighting against the pain of moving his body until his palm landed on Utakata's stomach. Almighty push! The rods piercing his body shot out from his back, stabbing into the wall behind him as he slumped forward. But he forced himself to stay awake, there was one more thing to do. Preta path. He grasped the small amount of tailed beast chakra inside Utakata and began drawing it out. This would kill the Rokubai, meaning if this all was for nothing, he would to wait a few years until it reformed, but he did not care. It slowly started seeping out from Utakata's stomach, burning through his clothes and skin as it emerged. Slowly, but surely, it flowed into Nagato. Minutes passed, his body slowly rejuvenating itself, the holes in his back sealing up. Eventually, every last drop of chakra had been absorbed. Nagato opened his eyes and pushed himself out of his seat. He stumbled for a moment, legs numb from disuse, but soon he was standing steadily. Utakata still floated in front of him, pale and shivering and with a massive burn on his stomach. Nagato stared at him with dull eyes, before sighing quietly. He raised his hand once again. Purple energy started gathering on the ground behind Utakata, a massive head emerging from the ground, mouth opening wide, a tongue with a hand at the end shot out from it. It grabbed Utakata tightly before pulling him inside its gullet, the man disappearing. The King of Hell started chewing, the sound of bones breaking and flesh tearing echoing in the otherwise silent room. Eventually, he finished, spitting out a fully healed Utakata onto the floor, even his clothes had been restored. Dump him somewhere outside the Omegakure, Nagato ordered. Make sure it's somewhere without shinobi. Konan silently obeyed, grabbing Utakata and walking away. Konan. Nagato stopped her for a second. If I don't come back, please. No, if I don't come back, live freely, you've always followed me on my selfish journey. Don't belittle me like this, Nagato. Konan replied softly. All the things I did because I too believed in your dream. She looked over her shoulder to make eye contact with him. And even if it was just a fantasy, a lie, I have no regrets. With those words, she walked out of the room, Utakata in tow. Nagato watched her go with a bitter smile. First, he would go to the land of waves, and no matter if he received answers there or not, afterwards, he was going to confront Madara. He would not hide away like a coward. 2 days later, Nagato had arrived at the massive bridge without issue. He had used the transformation jutsu to hide his Rinnegan from everyone's eyes while traveling, and wore a simple black cloak. As he made his way across the bridge, he noted with interest that it was quite busy, a constant stream of wagons rolling both in and out of wave. Eventually, he reached the checkpoint at the start of wave. There were almost 24 masked men and women stationed there, some inspecting each wagon that passed through, others handling the 3 lines of people who wanted to enter. Nagato simply walked into one of those lines, patiently waiting for it to move. He didn't have to wait long, as soon they reached the front, where 2 masked men stood waiting. Name and reason for entry? One asked as he pulled out a notepad. Nagato, I am looking for someone, a man I met some time ago. Nagato answered simply. Any association with a shinobi village or a shinobi organization? Yes, once upon a time, I was part of a Megakure. Hey! The guard muttered confused. That's rare. Normally, lone shinobi aren't that honest. Well, then you will have to wait a little bit, we need authorization to let any shinobi inside our borders, standard procedure. I understand, Nagato said calmly. He was directed towards a small area next to the checkpoint where several chairs were placed, most empty besides 2, occupied by a man in red samurai armor and a rotund man with graying hair and a beard. Nagato didn't bother initiating conversation with them, simply sitting down and waiting silently. The minutes passed, he watched the people entering wave go by, ignoring the other 2 people chatting. Eventually, the guard approached him. You're clear to enter, I have been told you should head towards Sawasawa village. A map is available for purchase in the stalls next to the bridge or freely available temporarily at any shrine. He stated politely. Please be warned that any combat against anyone that hasn't attacked you first is forbidden, even if they are shinobi from a different village. Nagato raised an eyebrow at the first part of what he said. It was confirmation that the being he met was connected to this land. I understand, thank you. Nagato replied, standing up. The man nodded and escorted him past the checkpoint, giving a short wave goodbye before returning to his post. Nagato began walking towards wave. His body was already regressing, he could feel some aches and pains that were familiar to him. But he had enough time before the Rinnegan drained all of his borrowed vitality. It would be enough to confront the burned man, and it would be enough to confront Madara. Chapter 34, Setting the Board on Fire. Nagato jump scare. I was training in the forest when Shun, the Star Eater I assigned to the bridge, since the initiates on the bridge couldn't deal with high-level shinobi just yet, contacted me. All my Star Eaters had all the knowledge I had, and I did tell Shun to tell me if any of the canon characters showed up. I was not expecting the actual Nagato Uzumaki to show up. Pain? Sure, I did bait him last time, but not the crippled porcupine cosplayer. I told Shun to tell the initiates at the border to direct him my way. If he went from the bridge in a straight line towards Sawasawa, he would pass right next to my current location. He went to one of my shrines and asked to look at the map, got sidetracked for an hour by the priestess noticing his sickly appearance and insisting on giving him some proper food, as she called it. The image of an elderly lady bullying Nagato into eating chicken soup was very funny. I totally was going to find an excuse to bless her with something good just for that. It made me laugh. The arguably most powerful human in the world getting pushed around by a 60-year-old woman will forever be in my memory. Nagato eventually left and resumed his walk towards Sawasawa. Well, the moment he got out of the capital he started flying towards me. I had to admire the sheer versatility of the Rinnegan. Eventually, he was out of sight of my area of influence, and I didn't feel like spending DP to track him, so I just went back to training. Nagato observed the man practicing ninjutsu below him. He looked different from the being he met, and he did possess chakra, but this one also lacked a soul. He silently floated down from his position high in the sky, landing some distance away from the man. The man didn't react, simply weaving hand signs, spewing out a lightning bolt from his mouth into one of the many boulders scattered around the clearing. Nagato waited silently for him to turn around and talk to him. He didn't. He noticed that every time the soulless man moved, he deliberately moved in such a way as to not look at Nagato. The man obviously knew Nagato was here, but was pretending not to. So he was being deliberately ignored. Nagato waited a few more seconds before speaking up. "I'm looking for someone. A bit rude, innit?" the man said in an amused tone. "Not even a hello first?" Nagato felt slightly annoyed. "Hello," he stated dryly, watching as the man turned around with a smile. He noticed that this one looked completely different from the last soulless being he met in these lands. This one had long black hair, tied back into a ponytail, fair skin, and a face unmarred by stress or hardship. The only hint that this man wasn't ordinary was the faint golden ring around his pupils. "Hello," the man greeted in return, but didn't continue speaking. "I am looking for the creature I met months ago on the sea surrounding these lands." Nagato continued after a few seconds of silence, realizing that the man wouldn't elaborate further. He was covered in burns and had golden eyes. "A bit rude, innit? Asking someone for help without even introducing yourself." The man responded with the same amused smile as before. A tiny part of Nagato felt like using an almighty push or two to see if he would shut up, but he suppressed it. He shouldn't give in to his emotions, not when answers were so close. "I am Nagato Uzumaki." The man hummed thoughtfully. "Nice to meet you again, this time in the flesh." So it really was the same being. Good, Nagato had found him. "Then I request that you answer some questions about our last meeting," he stated bluntly. "Of course, what did you want to know?" the man asked casually, sitting down on a nearby boulder. Nagato looked at him silently for a few seconds. Was it really this easy? "How much do you actually know?" "About me, about my Rinnegan?" he asked quietly. "Well, are you sure you want to know? Some say that ignorance is bliss," the stranger said cheerfully. "A millennium of history, all coming together to form your life." Nagato clenched his fists slightly before letting out a breath, calming himself. "Yes," he answered firmly. I suppose it would be best to start at the beginning," the man mused. "There exists a clan outside of this world, the Tsutsuki clan." "Outside of this world?" Nagato questioned, confused. "Yes, they travel from planet to planet, planting trees called god trees on each one. They use those trees to absorb life force from every living thing on the planet, eventually reducing the planets themselves to barren rocks. Once that is done, they eat the fruit grown from the god trees to gain immense power, and then they repeat the process on a new planet." The talk continued like this. It was a long one, detailing the history of the Sage of Six Paths and his brother, their fights against the Ten-Tailed Beast, the formation of the Tailed Beasts from the Ten Tails, the Warring States era, everything until Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha's last fight and the planning that followed. "And then you were given those eyes, to use them until you died while collecting the tailed beasts, ready for Obito Uchiha to collect." I finished my explanation. Nagato had been silent for the majority of it, only speaking up to ask a few questions when he was confused about something. We stood there, Nagato deep in thought and me watching him. His eyes were dull, staring down at the ground. I suppose your entire life's purpose turning out to be a scam is rather depressing. Why? He suddenly asked after several minutes of silence. Why did you tell me all of this? That was a good question, why indeed? I have a choice before me. I started slowly. To let Zetsu carry out his plan and allow Kaguya to return to this world, or prevent it. Nagato frowned as he stared at me. Why would that be a choice? You yourself have told me that Kaguya attempted to consume all chakra in this world. Because from what I could gather, she isn't evil, just insane and disconnected from humanity due to being an immortal alien. Her clan, on the other hand, is full of beings that wish to turn living worlds into power. It was a decision I had been thinking about for a while now. It has been a long time since Kaguya arrived here and betrayed her people, but I do not know on what timescale they operate on. They could be dust at this point, or they could arrive tomorrow to find out why Kaguya has not returned. Nagato frowned even further. You wish to leave the choice in my hands? Yes. I nodded. You will make your choices. Maybe you will usurp Madara's plan and attempt to take the power of the Ten Tails for yourself. Maybe you will abandon it altogether and become a wandering hermit, or maybe you will destroy those eyes and let it all become a problem of a future generation. Zetsu will try again with someone else after all. I didn't think any choice I made could be considered optimal. No matter which way I go, I did not have the full picture. Something that was remarkably rare ever since I became a god. I see. Nagato looked up at the sky. I still do not know who you are, or what your motives are, but if what you say is true, thank you. Don't worry about it. I shrugged. In the end, I just gave you some information, what you do with it is on your shoulders. Nagato closed his eyes and sighed heavily before opening them again. I do not know what I will do afterwards, but I will confront Obito. He stated with conviction. I refuse to let him toy with me any longer than he already has. Hey, guess even Nagato has his limits. I don't blame him, I would probably do the same thing. Do be careful. The only reason I cannot confidently say that you are the strongest human currently alive is because of him. He has wood style, a Mangeki Sharingan and the ability to resurrect himself once. I warned him, putting as much weight in my words as possible. You may have the Rinnegan, but it has a limit. Obito doesn't, he can fight for weeks. I really didn't know how such a fight would turn out, both were monsters on an entirely different level from regular shinobi. If Nagato failed and died, then Obito's plan continues only slightly altered, but if Nagato manages to somehow kill Obito. A world without the Fourth War, Zetsu would likely try to manipulate Sasuke and Naruto into continuing the cycle, maybe resurrecting Madara himself. Oh well, I chose to leave it in the hands of fate, there was no point wondering about what ifs. Nagato nodded solemnly at my warning before walking away. He stood still for a few seconds before he started floating, rising up through the canopy and disappearing into the sky. Back to training I go. Chapter 35, a little downtime. They are clean as far as we can tell, Hokage-sama. Tsunade hummed thoughtfully, taking another sip from her tea bottle. It was supposed to be sake, but Shizune managed to replace it somehow, again. They were sitting in one of the meeting rooms in the Hokage building, discussing the newest addition to Konoha. The Watcher's Shrine had been built relatively quickly, the order had been very efficient in its construction. They brought their own materials and took care of everything themselves, not bothering Konoha's residents at all. She had given them a plot of land, located in the merchant district. It was the best compromise that allowed Konoha to keep an eye on them while not providing them easy access to anything vital or secret. Any ideas? She asked the man sitting in front of her. They are so unsuspicious, it actually makes me more suspicious. Shikaku chuckled softly and nodded. I agree. He stated amusedly. The progression of cult to religious order has happened before, but these guys did it awfully fast and without any major mistakes. Tsunade sighed, leaning back in her chair slightly. Keep 2 squads on them, for now, ones with Hyugas, she ordered firmly. We'll keep our guard for a few months, until we're sure they aren't up to something. Shikaku nodded with a grunt, standing up. Understood. He left the room, leaving Tsunade alone to her thoughts. Maybe they were just fanatics? If they just wanted to spread their religion, that would explain a lot. She took a swig from her bottle. Ugh! I want some sake, damn it! She said, annoyed after realizing it was tea, still. One day later, Shin walked on stage and faced the people gathered in the temple grounds. Thousands of faces stared up at her expectantly. "My people," she started solemnly. "I stand before you today, filled with pride for this wonderful country." She began slowly walking across the stage. "I have stood upon this stage many times, announcing tragedies and triumphs, disasters and successes. I have been blessed by your support to guide this nation as its high priestess." The crowd was silent, waiting for her to continue. "And today I come to you once again with an announcement." She smiled. "One that fills my heart with hope and joy. As you know, just a few weeks ago, I was visited by our new neighbors, the Order of the Watcher. As you all also know, our talks bore fruit. We would give them permission to build shrines in our land. They did so, quickly showing their commitment to kindness and generosity. They provided help wherever they could, all without asking for anything in return." Shin stopped moving at the center of the stage. "And then, they offered more help, something that has plagued us for decades, MRYS followers, a group of people responsible for thousands of deaths amongst our own, responsible for spreading suffering and fear wherever they went. They did so, ending the threat of MRY permanently, working with my temple guards to end them once and for all." The crowd started cheering when she announced the destruction of MRY's cult. They plagued the land of demons for generations, sowing chaos and suffering whenever they could. When MRY set in motion his plan to subjugate the world, many died opposing him. After her mother sacrificed herself to seal him, many hoped that would be the end, but not a year went by without another incident of the cult trying to resurrect their master. Their deaths were cause for celebration, one that many were having. Shin waited for it to quiet down before continuing. "All this has led me to the decision I am here to announce today. I have officially decided to recognize the Watcher behind the stars as a god, worthy of our worship and devotion." She stated loudly. "Today, and every year from now on, we will celebrate this day, the Starfall Festival." At her announcement, the sky turned dark, revealing countless stars racing across the sky. It was a beautiful sight that left the entire crowd speechless. The stars eventually faded away, and the sky returned to its previous color, leaving the crowd completely silent. Shin stared up at the sky. What? Her mind blank after witnessing such a spectacle. She almost jumped out of her skin when suddenly there was an explosion of activity from the crowd. Cheers, shouts and clapping could be heard coming from thousands of people. Shin stood there for a few seconds, lost, before she composed herself again and waved at the crowd with a smile. The cheers just got louder. It was hard to doubt someone's divinity when you saw them paint the sky. 2 weeks later, I hummed in thought as I watched my latest experiment. Well, humming would imply my vocal cords were working, and not currently occupied with being mostly burned by my attempt at boil release. I had basically mastered every jutsu Konoha gave us, and in a fit of boredom decided to try and mix affinities. The results had been disappointing to say the least. Basically, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, if your body wasn't compatible, bad things happen. I still believed that it was possible to recreate the mixed elements without the required bloodlines, but it needed some more thinking. I really should be focusing on improving my skills with the basic elements, but it's just so boring. Turns out that becoming a super strong shinobi was surprisingly monotonous once you got the gist of it. I didn't even have to worry about chakra capacity or strength training, those were already covered by my body's genetics. I wonder how normal shinobi don't die from boredom. Is that why a lot of them are insane? Because they spent days on end repeating the same task until they get slightly better at it. Ah well, I'm going to take a walk, a very enthusiastic walk. I tried the whole constant training thing, and it's not for me. Why put in hard work when I can just cheat and copy someone else? And I know just where to find one of the most talented shinobi in all history. Chapter 36, Rin in Sight. 2 weeks later. My human body was whistling as I was walking across the desert that made up most of Wind Country, approaching my destination. Wind Country is mostly empty, lots of sand and rocks, only a few spots suitable for civilization. It honestly didn't take long to find out where the ruins of Rin were. They might be called ruins, but they were only about 20 years old. From what I remember, the city fell into ruin after an unspecified war happened. I asked around about that, since the only war I knew happened in that time frame was the Third Shinobi War, which meant as soon as Minato and companions dipped from the city, Rin got fucked over. All I got as an answer was that ninjas fought there, and Rin was destroyed in the process. People weren't exactly fond of talking about it. Well, none of that actually mattered now. Did it? Either time was set in stone, or it wasn't. I don't know if time travel works on either a stable time loop theory or multiverse theory. If it's the first one, then everything I do here has already been accounted for and my actions have already happened. If it's the latter, then nothing matters anyway, since I'm creating a new reality by going back in time. Upon cresting a dune, I saw it. A collection of massive towers emerging from the sands. Few were standing, none were standing straight, most had crumbled over the years, leaving massive ruins carpeting the ground. The place I was looking for wasn't too hard to find, it was located inside a gigantic hole in the ground, visible even from here. I made my way down, well, I just jumped down the hole. Upon landing, the center of the tower was easy to reach. Within was what I was looking for, a stone eye, a very distinctive kunai stabbed through its iris, surrounded by a massive seal. Fucking seal masters! I muttered annoyed as I observed the giant fucking circle. They gotta make everything so me damned complicated. Wait, why was this here if I was about to use it? If I unsealed it now, then the puppet guy would never be able to use it to travel back in time. Which would lead to Minato never sealing it, and it not being here when I came to find it. Fucking time travel. Just ignore that, don't think too deeply on it. Either it works or it doesn't. I sat down and gathered my divine power, sending it into the eye. Time to see if I can break the seal in just the right way to time travel. One day later. I stared at the thing with dead eyes as I felt it stare back at me mockingly. I was no closer to finding out how the seal worked than I had been yesterday. But thankfully, I didn't need to. I think I know how to use it. The seal was feeding off the Rimyaku to stay active, and it was based on the Hiroshin formula. And while I am not a seal master, I could see the parts of the seal. If I forced enough power into one part, specifically the part responsible for the space-time component of the formula, it would probably jump through time. Maybe. Probably. Hopefully. If it didn't work, I lost a body that was worth about a week's worth of DP and the Land of Wind lost a historical landmark. Was that really worth it just to steal some genetics and knowledge off Minato? No. But I'm doing it anyway. Alright you bastard, I muttered as I reached out with my divine power. Let's go on an adventure. Divine power flooded into the seal, flowing into it like a river. I wrapped it around the flow of chakra coming from the Rimyaku and then forced it all to converge on the component I wanted. Then shit got weird. My human body suddenly felt like someone had grabbed its spine and was now trying to play jump rope with it. My god body, on the other hand, got flashbanged by my connection to my human self being dragged through time. Eventually, it stopped, and I blinked. I could no longer feel my realm or any of my followers. I was back to floating in an endless black void in my god form. And my human body was in the middle of falling. The ground was rushing up to meet me, so I hurriedly twisted midair to land on my feet before rolling to bleed off the rest of the momentum. After coming to a stop, I took a look at my surroundings. Yup, this was definitely Rin again. The towering building were still standing straight, and I could hear people yelling as they fought nearby. Well, all things considered, it wasn't the worst time travel trip you could have, I suppose. That also confirmed that the past wasn't altered, even though it wasn't possible for Puppet Guy and Naruto to travel there anymore. Does that mean the past is unchanged because it happened before my arrival? When I first arrived in Wave all of this had already happened, and now I traveled back to this time, it remained as it should because it already happened. Man, this shit is giving me a headache. At least I could feel a connection to the Rimyaku, it probably meant that if it was sealed again I would be sent back. Hopefully. Oh well, may as well get going and see if I can find the current, shouldn't be too hard, just follow the explosions and screaming. I stared at Naruto fighting, well, more like struggling against three puppets' attacks. They were clearly overwhelming him, using their superior numbers to keep him on the defensive. Also, he was using some sort of chakra blade to cut the strings. That's cool. But why wasn't he using shadow clones? Actually. Use your shadow clones, dumbass. I yelled at him from below him. He glanced at me before crossing his hands together. Mass shadow clone jutsu. The fight turned into a mess of smoke and purple laser as the puppets tried to contend with the new odds. After a minute or so of intense combat, Naruto's clones had successfully brought down all three puppets, the massive weak point of having to be connected with chakra strings giving him a big advantage when it came to taking them down. He jumped down next to me. Yo! Thanks for that! He said brightly, smiling widely. Before frowning. Wait, Don't call me a dumbass. I simply gave him a flat stare. You were getting overwhelmed by numbers, when you can literally spawn an army of yourself, and didn't use it. He just stared back at me stubbornly. Well, I was going to. You distracted me. He responded confidently. Before I could answer, he suddenly pointed at me dramatically. Wait. Who are you? How do you know my jutsu? He asked suspiciously. Man, this dude did not have a single filter, did he? You can call me Osamu, and I know that because I'm a big fan. I said casually. A fan? Naruto muttered before smugly smiling. Of course, I should have known. The great Naruto Uzumaki is already being recognized as a super awesome shinobi. His shouting was maybe a bit too much in this situation because just as he finished speaking, a squad of puppets flew from around a tower nearby and immediately targeted us. Naruto quickly turned to face them and raised his chakra blade in front of him. Alright then, round 2. I stopped him by putting a hand on his shoulder and stepping past him. Let me, I want to test something, I said simply. He grumbled slightly but didn't object further. As the puppets closed the distance between us, I started preparing. The most basic jutsu were usually simple. The Great Fireball Jutsu for example, was basically gathering fire-natured chakra inside your lungs and then breathing out. That's it. The simplicity of it meant that it also had a simple way to expand it, just use more chakra. As long as your body could handle it, you could theoretically fire an absolutely massive fireball at someone. On the other end of the scale was the Gale Palm Jutsu, another simple technique that didn't require complicated hand seals to use. If you have good enough chakra control, then there was no reason you couldn't perform it and the Great Fireball Jutsu at the same time. I finished the hand signs for the Great Fireball Jutsu, holding it, and started weaving them again, this time for the Gale Palm Jutsu. The puppets came within range and I unleashed both jutsus at once. Combination Jutsu, Gale Inferno. A massive ball of fire shot out from my mouth and at the same time I thrust my palms forward, a blast of wind feeding the flames into an inferno that engulfed all the puppets in a single wave of fire. I watched the remains fall to the ground with satisfaction. It had worked as I had hoped, both elements being compatible meant they could be combined into something much greater than just one element. Which wasn't a new thing, people had been aware of combination jutsu for centuries at this point, but doing it in one body was something I had not seen before. I did use a bit too much chakra tough. I once again thanked myself for being a perfectionist regarding this body. If it wasn't designed to be perfect, then I would be currently coughing up chunks of my lungs. After making sure there were no other threats, I turned around and found Naruto staring at me wide-eyed. "Dude," he said quietly. "That was awesome!" he yelled. "That was impressive, but foolish." The sudden new voice startled Naruto. He immediately jumped back into a fighting stance and faced it. Minato was standing there, wearing his ANBU uniform, behind him the Akimichi and the Abarame, both also in their ANBU gear. I immediately spend a good chunk of DP to scan their bodies, yoink. Guess I can fuck around now, maybe plant some seeds that will bloom in 20 years? Chapter 37, A Conversation with a Future Hokage. Hey, who are you? Naruto demanded loudly. The masked man took off his mask slightly, just enough to reveal the Konoha symbol on his head protector. Naruto relaxed after seeing that and lowered his weapon. Oh. Well, why didn't you say so? Minato stared at him for a little bit longer than normal before putting his mask back on and glancing at me. I think this conversation would be better continued later, we should get out of the open. He gestured at us both. You two take the middle, I will take the rear, Boar and Mantis will take the front. Sneaky, he didn't trust us so he had us take the middle, the Akimichi in front of us since he is the least likely to die from a sneak attack and him in the back since he can react the fastest to any perceived betrayal. I followed silently. I didn't really mind his distrust, he was a perfect shinobi, so that meant he was distrustful of everything he met, look underneath the underneath and all that crap. As we jumped away, Naruto managed to keep himself silent for about 2 minutes before breaking it. After he had gotten a clipped and short answer out of Minato, he turned to me instead. So you're Osamu, right? He asked. Where are you from? What's your favorite ramen? I chuckled slightly at his boundless enthusiasm. Naruto was always such a bright character in the series, with the little I saw in Wave and now this I guess it's confirmed. Be patient for now, yeah? We can talk once we arrive at whatever these guys consider safe. Naruto pouted at my response but didn't make any more attempts at conversation. Thankfully, it was only a few minutes later before we arrived at our destination. We jumped into a hole in the ground, revealing old ruin below us, dilapidated from neglect. It seems the Konoha team had holed up inside one of the buildings, using debris to barricade the doors and windows. They probably used that as their staging area while they scouted Upper Rin for their mission. Minato landed on the stone floor, followed by myself and Naruto. So. Naruto started immediately after landing. What's your favorite ramen? I laughed at his question, looking towards him with an amused expression. Tsukimen. I stated easily. Although I haven't eaten it in a long time. Ooh. Tsukimen is awesome too. Naruto exclaimed excitedly. But any miso ramen is definitely the best. I made a so-so motion with my hand. I'm not a fan of miso, don't like the taste. Naruto looked devastated for a second before smiling widely again. Well, you've never tried Toka's signature fish cake miso ramen. Once you have one bite, you'll be addicted to it. I suppose it can't hurt to try it someday, I replied. You totally should. It's super awesome. Naruto exclaimed enthusiastically before Minato interrupted. You two can catch up later, I have some questions for both of you first. Naruto pouted at being told off but didn't argue with it, sitting down on the ground instead. He pointed at Naruto. You, what are you doing here? He asked bluntly. How did you get here? Hey? Oh. Naruto quickly answered. Well, we were in the land of wind chasing this Mukid guy, but when we caught up to him, he absorbed this huge sealing formula into himself. He scratched his head in thought, looking for a way to explain. And then I woke up here, also where is here? He asked after realizing that he didn't know either. We are inside Rin. Minato stated, glancing towards me. Do you know how this happened? Before I could answer, Naruto let out a shout. Ah! What do you mean? Rin is in ruins. Ah! I spoke up. We just got sent back in time, so currently we are 20 years in the past. Naruto just stared at me dumbfounded. Hey! I shrugged, he really should have been used to crazy shit considering his protagonist lifestyle. Admittedly, time travel is a bit higher on the scale, but he should have some kind of resistance built up by now. Minato gestured at me. And you? How do you know this? And what is your goal? I felt a slight tingling on my skin, Minato using a small amount of killing intent to try and unnerve me. Sadly for him, I did not give a shit. You can call me Osamu, I can sometimes see the past, and my purpose of being here. Honestly? Most of the reason I was here, was because I wanted to fuck around. Sure, I got Minato's freakish brain scanned, so I could integrate it into this body, and I also wanted to steal a glance at his jutsu. But I really didn't need to do that, this body is just a side project for my own amusement. Technically I would be better served turtling up in wave and slowly expanding. But what kind of shit god would I be if I just let the world pass me by? I looked straight into Minato's eyes. I am a massive meddler, and I believe I can make some things better than they currently are. He took off his mask and stared back at me with an intensity that would have made any normal man piss himself. Time isn't something to play around with, he said carefully. Changing it can lead to catastrophic consequences. Even if you could prevent the death of thousands? Or prevent tragedies from happening? I asked mildly. Minato narrowed his eyes slightly at my response. Naruto, meanwhile, had remained quiet, he clearly didn't fully understand what was going on, but he did recognize that this conversation was important enough to stay quiet for. Yes. Minato stated firmly. The risk is too great. The price may be too great. I honestly was a bit miffed. I knew from my involvement that time wasn't so fragile that a change would cause everything to collapse. Naruto being here showed that the universe didn't give a shit about paradoxes. He should never have arrived in the past since I used the method that he was going to use, and yet. Here we were. You're an arrogant little shit, Incha. I said lightly, although it had a sharp edge to it. Minato frowned. What do you? You must already have some suspicions, I interrupted him. About who Naruto is, and what this means for the future, yet you just sit there, confident that the future that will happen is good and worth preserving. I spread my arms wide and gestured around me. You could prevent hundreds of tragedies, piles of innocent deaths that serve little purpose but to bring grief to those alive. You could prevent your son growing up alone and hated, but no. I glared at him. I was getting heated, and my mouth was running wild. It was something that rarely happened nowadays. Last time was with Jashin, and before that was back in my old life. Because you think you know better, that you alone need to protect the world from some intangible consequence that could destroy it if the past changed. He didn't react. He simply stared back at me with a cold expression. A perfect shinobi. I didn't bother. I stood up and walked away, heading towards the stairs. Changing the future would be bad for me. It was my previous knowledge that led to me easily taking control over Wave. It's why I managed to establish myself in the land of demons so fast. It was how I set Nagato against Obito. But Minato just didn't try. He was content in believing that the future was better off without any interference. That honestly annoyed me. Before I left, I turned back around. At least be a better father, even if you think that the past is better off unchanged, the future is ours to write. Minato twitched slightly. He glanced at Naruto, who had been watching silently so far. I walked away and out of the ruins, heading towards Upper Rin once again. I had a princess to save. Chapter 38, Scam Target Acquired. Initiate Gaslighting Protocols. 10 minutes later. I was stalking a young woman. I promise it's for good reasons. If I remembered right, the princess was about to be thrown off a tower by Puppet Guy, with Naruto arriving just in time to save her. Currently, I was using some DP to be intangible. I didn't trust my stealth just yet. It was an area I didn't practice at all. The princess was currently walking towards a balcony on one of the tallest towers, about to show herself to the people. Well, not people, more like puppets. A fuck ton of puppets. Honestly, this was kind of fucked up. I could only see one living person here, the princess. Puppet Guy really set up this whole thing just because. He could have killed her anytime he wanted, but nope. He decided to set up a whole crowd of puppets for her to make a speech to, and then throw her off a balcony. Oh well, as they say, one man's stupidity is another man's opportunity. I placed myself on a ledge of a nearby tower, watching over the whole scenario play out. The princess appeared at the balcony, smiling widely as she looked upon the people. She waved happily as she approached the railing, staring down at the gathered people below her. But as she got close, a hand shot out and pushed her forward. She stumbled and the balcony crumbled beneath her weight. She let out a shriek as she started falling, and I jumped off my ledge, using a shunshin to reach her in time. I caught her easily. She weighed basically nothing, and it wasn't hard to come to a stop. She looked up at me, confused and afraid. I ignored her as I dropped down on top of a walkway, and then onto the ground, out of sight from Puppet Guy. As soon as I touched the ground, I placed her back on her feet. "Are you all right?" I asked softly. She nodded rapidly, looking at me with wide eyes. Who are you?" she stuttered. "What just happened?" "My name is Osamu," I said simply. "I saved you after you were pushed off that balcony." She frowned, clearly still confused. "No. I must have slipped. How could anyone even want to kill me?" she muttered, disbelief and denial on her face. "Did you know that rulers have the highest mortality rate besides shinobi and soldiers?" I asked lightly. "You are one of the biggest targets in Rin right now." "Me?" she responded incredulously. "Why?" I gave her an incredulous look. I vaguely remembered from the movie, there was the whole arc of her denying the situation and Naruto having to show her what was really going on before she accepted reality. But, this shouldn't be that hard to accept. She just got thrown off a balcony. Fuck this, I hate misunderstandings. I grabbed her arm and started dragging her along. Wait! She cried out as she stumbled behind me. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to show you something," I said plainly, glancing back at her with a serious expression. "I think you need to see it." She frowned but didn't say anything else, letting herself be dragged along. We traveled for only a couple of minutes before I arrived at my destination. I could hear the puppets moving around the corner. "Look at this," I said solemnly. "This is what is happening in Rin right now." We walked around the corner, revealing the countless puppets marching across the field. What?" the princess muttered, eyes wide as she stared at the parade of puppets. I let go of her arm and spoke up. "For how long have you been waving at puppets?" She flinched violently and turned to face me. "The people," she stuttered, staring at the puppets walking by. I saw some realization enter her eyes, as she watched the soulless bodies walk. "There are no people anymore," I said softly. Just these things. Tears started falling from her eyes as she stared at the puppets. I stopped speaking, letting it sink in. After a minute or so of watching, I put my hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry you had to see this, I said sympathetically. But if nothing happens, this is how Ren will end, its people locked away, a pretend nation controlled by a madman. She startled slightly before staring at me with a desperate expression. Maybe it's a mistake, maybe Anrokusen just forgot, she suddenly started muttering, but I interrupted her. Are you sure? I interrupted her ramblings. Think back, what have you seen? Heard? Are you certain that he had no hand in this? The princess shivered slightly and her tears started coming down faster. She didn't say anything else. I glanced up towards the sky and wondered if I should stop taking advantage of people in a fragile state. Nah. I waited until she composed herself a little bit, watching as her gaze hardened with determination. You're right, she said softly, looking at me with fire in her eyes. Anrokusen must have had something to do with this. I have to help. This is my country. I smiled. Yep, just like Naruto, more prone to action than thought. It was a nice contrast to the overly serious type. That's great, I said happily, patting her shoulder in a friendly manner. Now, what's your name? She looked startled for a second before smiling weakly. My name is Sarah. Then Sarah, there is a way to stop him, I stated calmly. I can temporarily fight Anrokusen with the powers of my god. What? She asked confused. You mean, like ninjutsu? Nope, it's much greater than that, I answered seriously. I follow the Watcher behind the stars, and I can call upon some of his power when needed. But my god is still sleeping, the power I can draw from his blessings is limited in this time. She frowned, probably not really believing me, which was fair, it sounded like I was scamming her. Which I was, kinda. The details are not that important, but suffice to say, I can fight Anrokusen, I reassured her. You need to close the source of the Rimyaku, it will sap Anrokusen of his power. What does he have to do with the Rimyaku? She asked, narrowing her eyes. I could see her fists were still trembling a bit. He only has so much chakra, the Rimyaku is what allows him to control so many puppets, if we cut that off, he will just be an ordinary shinobi, dangerous, but something that can be dealt with. Then I'll do it, she said determinedly. It's my country, and I have to protect its people, even if that means stopping Anrokusen. I smiled, the plan was in motion, first we would free the people of Ren, then we would rush Anrokusen, the Konoha team would likely join in as well. Once Anrokusen was taken care of, Minato would likely seal the eye and return us to the future. And even if he wiped everyone's memories, I would leave some crumbs that would make sure that any Ren people would know of the Watcher in 20 years. Chapter 39, technically the first blessed ever. We were standing on top of some pipes, well, I was standing on top of them. Sarah was trying to choke me as she rode on my back as she stared at the emancipated citizens below her. I had used some DP to find this place, it was the main factory where all the men were being worked to death. I wanted to speed this whole thing up, so I was forcing a confrontation. Sarah didn't react for several seconds, before suddenly trying to jump down towards the imprisoned people, only stopped by grabbing her arms and pulling her back. I put her down on the pipes again and looked her in the eyes. Don't, I said firmly. You won't be able to help them, a single puppet could kill you easily. She clenched her fists and gritted her teeth, but didn't try and jump down again. Then what do I do? She asked harshly. Just sit here while you deal with everything. I let the silence stretch, looking reluctant before sighing. There is something we can do, I admitted reluctantly. But it might not work out well. What is it? She asked after a moment of hesitation, looking both hopeful and determined. There is a ritual I know, to beseech the Watcher behind the stars for strength, I said solemnly. But as I said, he is currently sleeping, and this ritual may not work at all. I saw her take a breath, gathering herself before nodding sharply. What do I have to do? She asked. Just repeat after me, and let your faith be true, I responded vaguely. She nodded again and closed her eyes. I smiled slightly, she really was trusting, not many people would just accept some random guy saying that he knew how to talk with a god. I, humble before the stars, beseech you, Sarah spoke up. I, humble before the stars, beseech you. Watcher behind the stars, you who dwell in the infinite void, grant me your divine strength. Watcher behind the stars, you who dwell in the infinite void, grant me your divine strength. A blessing of power, so that I may defend the ones I care for. A blessing of power, so that I may defend the ones I care for. I offer you my faith and devotion, Watcher, in return for this request. I offer you my faith and devotion, Watcher, in return for this request. As we finished the chant, I pulled Sarah into my divine realm. It was empty, since this was in the past. She appeared inside it with a gasp, her eyes shooting open as she gazed around the place. Almost immediately, her eyes turned towards my god form. I was laying amongst the stars, eyes closed, as I drifted through them. Sarah's mouth dropped open as she stared at my resting form, all thoughts being pushed out of her head from seeing me. Then she attempted to bow, but this realm lacked gravity at this moment, so she just ended up awkwardly spinning. I decided to take pity on her and spent a small amount of DP to slowly put her in place. When she finally settled down, she looked back at me with a lost expression. Hello. She stuttered out, not really knowing what else to do. I didn't react. Come on girl, you can do better than that. Sarah was fully panicking inside, this isn't what she had expected when she asked for help. First she finds out about her life has been a pretty life for who knows how long, then she finds out that all her citizens are imprisoned, and now she's in the presence of an actual god. This had to be a dream or something, right? She swallowed, she needed to be strong, people were relying on her. She straightened her back and stared into its closed eyes. Honorable Watcher behind the stars, she started shakily. We humbly request your divine intervention, I beseech thee to lend us strength. No answer, but the stars seemed to shine brighter. The god shifted slightly and Sarah gulped, her knees felt weak. I am not powerful. I'm not wise, because of my foolishness my people are suffering. Because of my lack of power, they could die. She continued loudly, overcoming her fear. I don't care what happens to me, let me protect them, please. She felt tears gathering in her eyes, clenching her fists tightly. Please. She whispered weakly. The third eye on the Watcher's head opened slowly, a golden orb gazing at her, the pressure emanating from it increased. She would have dropped to her knees if gravity existed here. A plea? The voice rang through the void, echoing through the stars. Sarah tried to answer, but no sound left her mouth. The eye turned slightly, before glowing brighter. You are worthy. Go forth. And protect what you hold dear. Some of the stars started shining even brighter, breaking apart into streams of golden light that flew towards Sarah, merging with her body as they touched her. Sarah wanted to yelp in surprise, but she still couldn't move or make a sound. She felt the energy merging with her, becoming stronger and faster. For a few seconds, she felt invincible. But then the light faded away, and the eye closed again. She still felt stronger, but it was a pale imitation of what she had felt moments ago. The stars surrounding her were dimmer now, the god before her had fallen asleep again, his eye closing once again. She felt herself being pulled, backwards? Forwards? She didn't know, but before she left this realm, she did one last thing. Thank you. I promise to be worthy of your blessing. And then she was back on top of the pipes, with Osamu watching her expectantly. Did it work? He asked curiously. Sarah smiled at him, she raised a fist in front of her, it burst into golden lightning, traveling through her arm. Osamu smiled, it was tinged with a bit of sadness. Sarah frowned. What's wrong? She asked cautiously. The excitement of the past few minutes fading slightly. Nothing, just me being selfish. He responded quietly. The Watcher spending so much power means it will take him longer to awaken. Sarah's eyes widened, and she instantly tried to apologize. Hey now, it's not your fault, Osamu interrupted her before she could even begin. This just means you will have to carry the will of the Watcher in my place until he awakens. She looked up at him with wide eyes. But it quickly shifted into determination. I will. Osamu smiled again, his expression happy once again. Now, let's get this over with. He spoke as he turned towards the enslaved workers below. We can talk more later, your people are more important. Sarah nodded, she called forth her new blessing, golden lightning enveloping her body. She jumped down towards the first puppet, the pipe beneath her bursting from the force of her jump. The puppet didn't even have time to react before it was blown apart by a single punch. The lightning disintegrating it. It was instinctive, she had never fought a day in her life, but she knew how to use her blessing and what it did. She knew exactly how to best punch to impart the greatest force, and how to jump to achieve the best speed. All the workers turned towards the loud sound. My people! Sarah spoke up loudly, her voice filled with emotion. I apologize, I am so sorry that I let this happen. She looked at them, meeting their empty gazes. Listen closely. She continued strongly. I will save you. You will be reunited with your families. I won't let anyone harm you anymore. Chapter 40, Stop talking. Maybe I gave her a bit too much power. Sarah was smashing through puppets like they were nothing. I don't think there was even a need for me to be here. I gave her basically a discount lightning release chakra mode, and I forgot that being faster than an opponent is one of the best ways to make sure you hit them, so in between releasing the citizens from their chains, the moment a puppet slightly moved she punched into smithereens. This wouldn't be enough to stop Anrokuzen though, he could fix his puppets pretty easily if he had access to the Rimyaku, so I was just waiting until he showed up so I could stall him until Sarah finished freeing everyone. Then we would lock the Rimyaku again, which would stop his shenanigans. I was interrupted by a certain squad landing next to me. Minato, Shibi, Chise, and Naruto all looking at me. What is going on here? Minato asked immediately after arriving. I shrugged. The princess is saving her people. Anrokuzen. He asked next, frowning slightly. He hasn't shown up yet, but I'm expecting him any time now. Minato observed the happenings below, observing Sarah as she tore through chains and puppet alike. Nothing in our information indicates that the princess should be trained in ninjutsu. He said neutrally. It's not ninjutsu, also temporary. Don't worry, this still adheres to the proper flow of things. I lied as easily as I breathed. He glanced at me with a calculating expression but didn't comment. She has to lead her people away, regaining their trust and loyalty. If she doesn't, when Rin is destroyed the people will too. Minato frowned but nodded slightly. And then it happened, Anrokuzen showed up, appearing on a ledge above us all and he didn't look happy. Sarah looked up at him with narrowed eyes, golden lightning still enveloping her body. Anrokuzen! She yelled angrily. Explain yourself. What do you think you're doing? He demanded in turn, ignoring her words. Why are you here? You should be dead by now. Sadness flashed through Sarah's eyes before it turned into anger again. Guess a small part of her still hoped that maybe Anrokuzen wasn't involved in this. Why? She asked loudly. I trusted you. My mother trusted you. Why are you doing this to our people? Anrokuzen stared at her for a second before scoffing. Oh, stop being so naive. He said harshly. Your mother was a fool, content to sit on the power of the Rimyaku, and you're worse than her. Not a thought going through your head besides what I tell you. There is only one reason I would waste my time with this backwater city, it's to gain access to the Rimyaku. He ranted. With it, I can surpass any limits I had previously, an invincible army, Gria. He was interrupted by my fist slamming into his face, sending him crashing into a nearby pillar. I need to teach Sarah that talking is not a free action, always throw hands when the enemy opens their gob. The puppets standing on the ledges immediately converged towards us, being intercepted by Minato and Seo. Sarah hesitated for a moment before turning back to her people, continuing to help them escape. I gathered chakra in my lungs again, this time just going for a basic great fireball jutsu, waiting for the dust to clear. You bastard! Anrokuzen yelled as he emerged from the cloud of dust. Who are why? I quickly slammed my hands together into a seal sequence and took a deep breath. Fire style, great fireball jutsu. A massive ball of fire flew out of my mouth, straight at him. Don't worry, puppet guy, I will teach you why villain monologuing is a bad idea. Minato was having a strange day today. He was expecting a fair bit of trouble, considering that their mission was to uncover what was happening in Rin. But time travel was unexpected. His son being here was even more unexpected. He guessed that meant good things for his relationship with Kushina, if they had a son. Still, that didn't take away from the strangeness of this whole situation. Naruto seemed to have inherited both of their more rash tendencies, combined together with the Uzumaki vitality it made for a boisterous young man. This Osamu though. He had no idea what to think of him. His words were arrogant, as if he knew everything. But they were also said with conviction, his tone showed nothing but belief in what he said. He thought he would have to stop him from doing something drastic and changing the timeline, but his words a minute ago threw those assumptions out the window. Dad. Naruto's voice interrupted his thoughts. What should we be doing? While he thought Osamu's words were arrogant, his chastisement made Minato realize that he should be acknowledging Naruto as his son. What memories they brought back to the future were irrelevant. If he did not do everything he could to be Naruto's father in the short time they had, Kushina was going to kill him. Maybe he should write down some instructions for the Raise Nan? It was one of his best creations. He shoved down his thoughts and faced Naruto. Do you remember if what he said was true? Did the princess really save its people after Rin fell? Naruto scratched his head in thought before nodding. Yeah, I think so. I think Sakura mentioned it at some point. That was not the clear answer he was hoping for, but he would take what he could get. Water style, water dragon jutsu. A water dragon smashing into Myokabe interrupted his thoughts. Wait, why was he a puppet spider now? Minato blinked. He really needed to stay more focused. For now, they would assist Osamu in subduing Myokabe and make sure the people of Rin survived. Afterwards, once things have calmed down, he could have a longer talk about what actually happened, or will happen. For now, all of their priorities were set on freeing the people and stopping Myokabe, regardless of whatever may come. Naruto, help the princess with saving her people, you can help the most with the shadow clone technique. Chise, Shibi, you two are on interception duty, stop Myokabe from targeting any of the civilians, I will assist Osamu. They all nodded, Naruto quickly summoning dozens of clones that jumped down to help the citizens escape. Chise and Shibi spread out slightly, preparing themselves to intercept Myokabe's attacks when needed. Minato himself took out a bundle of his Hiroshin Kunao, throwing at Myokabe and the surrounding area. Once that was done, he leaped off the ledge, racing towards Myokabe. He summoned a Raise Nan in one hand and charged.
Thanks for listening.